This transformation will be some work, but with the sweat from our brow, a few high-performance components, this thing is going to be one sweet piece of Detroit muscle when we're done. This is Road Runner. You're watching PowerNation. Hey guys, today we're at the world's largest Mopar salvage yard, and there's 60+ acres of them here. Now our goal for today is gonna be finding us a new project and dragging it home. You know, there's a lot of factors that go into choosing the right project vehicle, and one of the things you need to consider the most is the financial side of things, because it costs a lot of money to restore an automobile. You don't want any surprises at the end and need to make sure everything makes perfect sense. With that said, there's other makes and models that are worth more than others, so consider that before you make your decision. Who doesn't want one of these? A Charger. We just finished one and it was a whole lot of fun to build, but it took us nearly 3 years to put it together, and we were working on that thing all the time. So you need to consider that. Your time, what's it worth to you? How quick do you want to ride? Well, I always stress to people, buy as much car as you can afford in the nicest condition, because it will gain you a tremendous amount on the backside of it. And walking around this field of dreams is a whole lot of fun, but I've come to realize I ain't this dedicated. So we're here to see Ted, the owner of Stevens Performance, and it's easy to say that this man is in the know when it comes to a Dodge project. How are you, boss?
Good, Tom. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Not as good as you. Look at all these rides you got sitting around.
Well, you know, comes with the territory.
Well, what we're looking for is nothing that's 100%. I don't really need shiny paint. Don't have to be original paint, nothing like that. You have anything that needs some work and something we could buy?
Yeah, I've got a couple we can work with. Let's take a look.
So excited.
Well, depending on where you want to go price point wise, we'd probably start with this. This is a Superbird project. It's in paint, engine's built, there's all of the pieces are here. It's just a big model car kit.
I don't think my checkbook goes that far, but it is a killer car. Tell me about it, like what engine package and all that?
It's a 444 barrel automatic. Plymouth built, I think, 1,953 of these cars. A few Hemis. The mix between 444 barrel and 446 barrel was almost even, which is kind of unusual, but these cars were kind of special cars, and surprisingly, a lot of them have survived because they were so odd that people saved them.
Yeah, to call this car odd is not a far-fetched statement by any means.
Oddest might be better.
Yeah, these things I know didn't really sell that well whenever they come off from the factory either. Like, a lot of them sit around.
Yeah, the dealers actually converted some of them back into Road Runners.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they took the noses off, took the wings off, put bumpers on the front.
Just because they couldn't sell it.
Couldn't sell it.
It's crazy enough to say that because of they're so sought after now.
They are. One of the problems with these cars was insurance because of the nose cone and the expense of the nose cone. If you ever bumped one of these things in a parking lot, it was expensive to repair.
What's all been done to it now?
We painted it. We had to replace the quarter panels on it. I think the trunk floor. Like I said, we've moved on with, like I said, engine rebuild, and we've accumulated all the parts to put it together with.
When this car is completed, I know they're expensive, but what is, in all reality, what's a reasonable price that someone would pay for one of these things?
These cars right now are selling between $125 and $175, depending on how nice the car is. I mean, that's for a 444 barrel car. Right. A 6 barrel car will bring more than that, and a Hemi will bring a lot more than that.
Well, I know this thing is definitely out of my price range, and maybe one day I can just drive it or drive one of them. I know a man who might have one I could drive.
Someday.
Let's go check something.
You might have to turn a wrench before that happens. Well, if the Super Bird is out of your price range, how about a Super B?
I do like a B body.
This is a 70 model. It's a 446 pack, Super Track pack car, automatic 410 Dana 60 axle. Pretty low production. If you want to stay with a B body car, this one would work. It's basically ready to paint, but we have all the rest of the pieces to it. All the stuff you don't see, we have hidden somewhere.
6-pack is awesome, but I'm kind of looking for a car. I'm gonna call it like reduced for quick sale, because I'm probably gonna cut it up.
We won't be cutting this one up.
You don't think so?
Let's look a little further.
You got something else hiding out?
Yeah, I got one out here that might fit the bill.
Alrighty. Coming up, that's what I'm talking about. A piece of American muscle that hasn't seen daylight for a while. Hey guys, welcome back. We're here at Stevens Performance, and it's time for us to see the goods. Ted said he's got kind of a bargain car. I know it ain't gonna be cheap, but I'm anxious to see it.
That depends on your definition of cheap.
That's what I'm talking about.
How about it?
That looks more in my price range for sure.
Well, with what you've told me that you want to do, which involves a Sawzall, this might be more along the lines of something you could do that with.
So you say we wouldn't be like crucifying this car if we cut it up a bit?
Not if you don't cut it up much. This one just came in from California. It's a good dry car. We have a supplier out there, Brother Dave on the West Coast, that brings us nice cars like this from time to time. And these are great builders. This car doesn't have an engine or transmission in it, but it's a good solid body, a good place to work with. And it is a Road Runner, and it's a good color.
Can we dig it out of here to see what it looks like in the daylight?
Sure. All right, if you're looking for a project car, 69 Road Runner. It don't get any better than that. Good floors, good trunk, good quarter panels, almost unheard of today. Like I said, it came from California, so we're not dealing with any salt rot or anything like that, like most people on this side of the country are accustomed to. So I think this would be a good car to work with.
Now, if we put a Hemi in it, is that a problem?
Nope, put whatever you want in it.
All I can tell you is my plan for this thing is it's going to be pretty fast and look pretty aggressive. I'm normally a paint and body guy, but I don't think I'm going to touch it at all.
I like the green hood.
Well, that may just have to go. I'll bring it back.
Well, you could rattle can it black.
Or I could just bring it back.
Or you could bring it back.
It's missing a few pieces. I'm going to need a grill. Looks like some other trim, windshield, that kind of thing. Think we can go on a scavenger hunt?
We can do it.
All right, I'll follow you because you know where the stuff's at.
Get the tools.
Depending on the style of your restoration and how complete the car is that you're working on, a place like this could be your salvation. Did you find us some goodies?
Yeah, there's a pretty good looking grill and headlight bezels. I don't know what they're laying in this car for, but you find something new every time you come out here. But I think that'll work pretty good for what we're working with here. It kind of matches the car.
Yeah, it's kind of aged out and used for sure. Now, I know our car's kind of crusty, but I still want some blingy bumpers and some trim and new glass. And we're probably still going to need a few other pieces that they don't even make.
Yeah, some things, I think we need turn signal lamps for that car, and those aren't available. We should be able to come up with a good set of used ones. And we actually make the lenses for those. We'll have some. There's your bling. You'll have new turn signal lenses.
Man, yeah. You know, but that's, you having those used pieces is kind of what separates you from everybody else, right? Because not everybody wants used pieces.
No, they don't. Like the guy that's working with a Survivor car, he doesn't want to put new reproduction parts on his car because they may not look quite right. So he's looking for nice used stuff that matches the rest of the car.
You said nice used stuff. Can we find some of them turn signal pieces?
Yeah, let's have a look. Let's go up another row or two.
After picking through the boneyard, it was time to hit the warehouse. I know you made a list on that beauty.
Yeah, I've got an Atlanta phone book size list for that steaming pile. I mean, a piece of American automotive history.
Come on, man, be nice.
Okay. Okay, we're going to need side marker lenses. Here they are. And turn signal lenses. Both of these are licensed with Chrysler. They are exact reproductions of the original parts. They have the exact markings and Chrysler's Pentastar logo. So if you're looking for the right stuff,
correct,
this is it, the correct stuff.
That's nice.
That'll about size up the outside of it.
Well, I got plenty to do now, it looks like.
That'll keep you busy for a day or two.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm gonna be calling you. I'm gonna be needing something else.
Be glad to have you. Y'all come back now, you hear?
Coming up, we open the history books and see why these cars are so sought after. Well, anytime we have a new project in the shop, it's a good day for me. And since Tommy got to have the joy of hanging out with Ted and picking up the car, I sent him out on some errands. And you may notice we've got a new face here in the shop. This is Daniel Bo Shears, no relation. And he's actually a good friend of ours. He's helped us out a lot over the years behind the camera on projects we needed help on. He's well connected in the industry. He works with Ted at Stevens Performance, also Tim Welburn at the Welburn Muscle Car Museum. He does consulting for race teams. He's been in several automotive publications. I could go on and on, but needless to say, really excited to have you here, Daniel.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate you introducing me, and I appreciate you guys also bringing me in on this particular project. These Road Runners are one of my favorites.
Yeah, I know this is right up your alley, but when I looked at it the first time, I was like a little skeptical because it looks rough.
Yeah, it looks rough, but it's got it where it counts. The floors are good, the frame rails are good. We don't have any major repairs to do, and it's a really good canvas for the project we've got in mind.
Yeah, and you know, Tommy's always pegging me as a Mustang guy, and although I do lean a little toward the blue oval, I love all muscle cars, and when it comes to Mopars, 69 Road Runner, top of my list.
Yeah, they're one of my favorites too, and after all, these Road Runners are muscle car royalty. In 1968, Plymouth decided to get a little crazy with its muscle cars, and it unleashed a stripped-down, bare-bones version of its tried-and-true Belvedere. And they named it after a cartoon character. The Road Runner was an instant hit. Many a Ford and Chevy spent time chasing down the bird car, but like the Coyote, they had a hard time catching it.
What I like about driving the car is how it handles. The car handles great. The engine never came out of the car. It still runs excellent.
The power in this baby is a 383 4-barrel. It hammers out 335 horsepower, and for a little extra cash, you could throw in a 6-pack, or even a Hemi if you really wanted to leave them in the dust. And the allure in 1968 for these vehicles was outstanding. Plymouth expected to sell 20,000 of these fast cars. The good news for the dealers is that these flew off the lot. They crushed their sales projections with 45,000 cars sold by the end of the year. 1969 kicked off a strong year for the cartoon car. Sales soared by nearly 200% with just over 80,000 Road Runners sold. This relic from that era is in pristine condition. And the owner, well, you may recognize him.
This car is all original, probably one of the best paint cars we have.
This car has a 446 pack. Off the lot, you could take this car straight to the track and even win a race or two. Lacking trim, no hubcaps, and an oversized hood scoop, this iconic Mopar packed everything under the hood for someone to settle the score on the street or at the track.
But by 1970, the sales had plummeted for the Road Runners, actually cut the numbers in half. They just couldn't recreate what they made with the 68 and 69s, which makes these more sought after today. So we're really lucky to get our hands on this one.
Up next, you heard talk of a Sawzall. We'll give you the plan for our iconic muscle car next on Detroit Muscle.
I like the green on this hood, but that's not the right hood, is it?
No, it's a satellite hood. You can tell by the lines in it.
Yep.
All right, guys, we're about ready to start taking this car apart. The first thing we need to do is get our tools together. And I don't know about you, Mark, but I'm ready to get my hands dirty.
Yeah, but before we start digging in, let's talk about some of the specifics of this car and where we're headed. Well, the second thing I noticed about this car after I got past this ugly black paint was the wheels and tires. It's kind of cool because they're old school. These tires are probably as old as I am. They're all dry rotted. Obviously, the wheels are rusty. These have to go. If you look past that to the drums, they're rusty. And plus, we wanted to upgrade to disc brakes on something like this. As for the suspension, well, there's a lot on the aftermarket available. We'll probably pick something along those lines for that.
Now, I know this thing isn't pretty, but that doesn't make it uncool. I'm starting to notice a little Omaha orange shining through back here. Now, I'm not much of an orange guy, but if it were my car, I would start sanding as much of this black off as possible and try to help expose some of that rare color. Now, the black primer coupled with the surface rust give this thing a cool factor all to its own. And for this particular project, we'll probably just leave it alone. The one thing we're not going to leave alone is this interior.
Well, it doesn't take but a quick glance inside here to realize what bad a shape this is in. Let's just take a look at the seat for starters. This is a bench seat, so we're probably not going to save it, but if we wanted to, the frame is okay. Everything else would have to go. All the foam's broken down. The upholstery, it's vinyl and it's cracked and dried. I mean, just look at this. You can't even imagine the smell in here. Just be glad you can't smell it. There's a lot of stuff missing, like the door panels and other trim panels. There's no carpet in here, no headliner. So part of the work's done, but the rest of this has got to go. We'll probably retain the dash and the steering column, but other than that, this thing's gonna be a whole new interior when we're done with it.
Man, that interior's nasty. Ooh. All right, let's talk about under the hood. As you can see, this old Road Runner and its original 383 parted ways years ago, which leaves us with endless possibilities. And when I say endless possibilities, I mean as long as it's Mopar.
And it doesn't get any more Mopar than a Hemi, right, Pat?
Yes, I agree with that, but not particularly this one in this condition, but you have something good to start with.
Yeah, so this is a 6.4 liter out of a 2016 Ram 2500. Came out of a junkyard, obviously. Light burn is the description.
Light burn, okay, well, I don't know if I'd agree with that because you have a melted valve cover, but there are some lines and some hoses that aren't melted, so it might not have gotten too bad, but I think you got something that's really, really gonna make some power.
Well, what we're trying to find is about 550 horsepower.
Okay, well, that's not a big deal. These are good heads. The 6.4 has a good cylinder head, good architecture, a couple of 4 barrels on a tunnel ram sticking out of it with a standalone ignition system. I think we can get there.
I do believe so.
These are the most creative intake plugs I've ever seen, which now I've been looking for a new set of gloves, and I think I'll run those to the washing machine, and we'll
I gotta have 2 of those too, by the way.
All right, well, let's get this down to the shop and we'll see if we can get this thing apart.
I'm getting back to work. Y'all do that. Well, I bet you're wondering what those little blocks of wood are for. Old scraps of wood make great skis. Now that we got that old bench out of the way, we can tackle the back seat. It may look like I'm being a little rough with this old thing, but it's because we have to unclip the springs from the retainers in the floor pan. And to be honest, we aren't keeping much of the original interior in this old car anyway.
Today on Detroit Muscle, we kick off an all-new project, giving this 69 Road Runner an attitude adjustment with a trick new suspension and wheels and tires that will make your mouth water. Hey guys, welcome to Detroit Muscle. Now, a few of you all probably are thinking that I've just pushed in a big old pile of fertilizer. But actually, I'm gonna have to ask you to think back to some of those kind words that your mom probably used to say. And that would be, it's not what's on the outside, but it's actually the inside that, matters. I know this old Mopar isn't much to look at in its current condition, with its old ratty wheels and tires. Paint that's multicolored and flaking off here and there. The glass, well, it does have some optical interference, but our big pile is actually a piece of iconic American muscle. It's a true 69 Road Runner, and some consider these one of the most sought after Plymouths ever. So to make things happen the way we want them, well, it's gonna take a whole bunch of parts to get us there. We want our ride to handle, we want it to have plenty of power, but most of all, we want it to make one heck of a statement. And in my humble opinion, I do believe that the recipe that we've came up with, well, is gonna be downright delicious. Tell you, I've been craving this for a while. That's right, we're not restoring this thing, but before all you Mopar people get all cranked up and yelling at the screen, sounding like you're having some kind of seizure or something, calm down. Take a deep breath. We're not crucifying some kind of rare car here. Also, on these old Mopars, they have a fender tag that will give you your order option codes. That thing would be located right over here, but it, along with our build sheet, is long gone. If we were wanting to restore this thing, those two pieces of information are crucial, but we're really not sweating it at all. That would be because with the style of build that we're doing, we have what's really important, and that's the rest of the car. This thing's gonna be a whole lot of fun, but it's all not gonna be fairy tales and pixie dust. With the interior, we're basically missing everything, except for some of the dash and the steering wheel. Oh, and I can't forget that old crusty long-legged loon. A few of you guys are probably saying, man, if I was to own that thing, I'd have to paint it. I get it. You guys know that I'm all about paint, and this car is actually an odd and rare color for one of these. To get a Road Runner in this Omaha orange, you would have to special order this ride. To repaint this thing, well, that's gonna cost some serious coin, and I don't really wanna get into all that. I wanna build something that we can downright abuse and have some fun with. And I'm really digging the way this thing looks. That fancy orange paint poking through that black primer, oh, it's got a cool look to it. And who am I to mess with all of Mother Nature's hard work making this abstract art? When this thing's all done, it's gonna be downright sinister. Usually when people judge the condition of a car, they do a simple walk around, but getting one on a lift like this can tell you a completely different story. I've seen some downright scary stuff. Floor pans being held in with glorified bubble gum, frame rails so rusty, I didn't know how it was standing on its own, and suspension, well, it was almost ready to fall out. But luckily, our Road Runner doesn't look too bad. It spent a good bit of its life on the West Coast, which usually means the floor pans and frame rails should be pretty solid. And I have to say, what I'm seeing kind of gives me that warm and fuzzy feeling on the inside. As for the suspension, I'm getting a total different vibe. All this stuff is gotta go. You know, technology has came a long way in the past 50 years, and we're gonna take advantage of that. So this junk is on its way out the back door. After this quick inspection, I do believe we have found us a solid foundation for our build. There's no real evidence that any tin worms have been really chewing on it. Heck, the trunk pan is even solid. These cars are so prone to being rusty back here, it's almost like they rolled out of the factory with rust in the trunk. Our frame rails, they're super clean and straight, so I'm gonna give this ride my stamp of approval so we can get this project started. Coming up, me and my buddy Joel start tearing down the suspension on our crusty old bird. Well, we're finally ready to start knocking the legs out from under our old Road Runner here. I brought in a buddy of mine, Joel, to help me out with this. The first order of business is getting this front suspension out of the way. You know, it shouldn't be all that big of a deal to get this thing torn down. There's only a few bolts that kind of hold this K-member in on this old Plymouth.
Yeah, and these torsion bars can be a real pain to get to too, but it's one of the joys of working on these crusty old cars.
Yeah, I remember the first time I tried to get one of these things apart. Man, I didn't even take a tension off of it. Learning experience.
I bet.
Ain't on nothing. Need a hammer now. While you get the hammering on that front, I'm gonna jump on the rear, man.
Sounds good.
Dang, it's kind of loud. Now, we're not saving much of anything from this original suspension. And with a car that's been sitting this long, hardware can be stubborn and difficult to remove. A quick spray with some deep creep sure can make your life a lot easier. It works fast to penetrate dirty and corroded threads, and as a result, saves you effort. Deep creep isn't a one-trick pony. It can help you remove old and tired suspension components, and it can also protect metal surfaces from moisture and corrosion. And this right here is kind of a good sign. Usually with U-bolts, you gotta fight to get them off because they're on the bottom of the car and they catch all that road debris. But luckily for us, these come right off. Now, Joel is one of the few guys I've seen use a pickle fork. And you know what? He may be on to something. There we go. What we're removing out back is literally everything that holds the car up. And with our car being a Mopar, it doesn't really have a frame, so all those parts bolt to just the body. Now up front, this K-member comes out as one giant piece, which is kinda handy. We're also going to add some convenience. This old school column is on its way out, and we'll replace it with a tilt unit. Well, alrighty, you can go on up. I bet these components haven't been out from under this Road Runner since it rolled out from the factory. And by the looks of things, laying in the floor, it's well overdue for an upgrade. Liking what I'm seeing?
Yes, sir.
That went a whole lot better than what I was anticipating. And you know, usually you've got that one bolt that kind of kicks your tail, and I didn't really have one back there in the back.
No, everything went smooth on my end too. What do you think? We ought to get all this stuff cleaned up so we can get started on some of that shiny stuff?
Yeah, if you want to grab a jack, I'll grab a couple boxes. Next up, it's out with the old and in with the new as we install the suspension in our 69 Road Runner. You know, it's easy to say that cars from yesterday have a feel all of their own whenever you're sitting behind the wheel. And, you know, whenever you hear the stories about people telling you how great they used to drive, well, I've been curious in the past if they weren't wearing some rose-colored glasses. We've all seen those old movies when they're just riding down the road, but they're doing this number, and that's on a Sunday ride. It's not that they drove bad, it's just whenever compared to modern times, well, they leave a lot to be desired. Next thing I want to talk about is the sheer physical size. Just look at this stuff. It's heavy, and usually heavy cars aren't fast cars. Lastly, this is a torque bar design front suspension, commonly found in 4x4 pickup trucks. We all know that they handle like a sports car. So to solve all those old car problems, we've got a full setup from Riley Motorsports. It's got a rack and pinion front steering unit for precise control with a steering wheel. The K-member is tubular, and that's got a couple of added benefits to it. One of them, you can tell that it's got a lot more clearance under the hood for those high performance options. Also, the geometry on it has been changed from that original setup for better handling and steering. We also have coilovers on both sides so that we can dial in those corners as needed. Now this kit just about bolts right into place. However, you do have to remove just a couple of small brackets. This is going to require throwing some sparks and drilling out a few spot welds. After that, we're going to get our hammer on, manually and pneumatically. Now this K-member bolts into the place that the original one came out of, and you're also going to be using the factory hardware. Now these 4 bolts are kind of special. They've got this big bolstered end on them that helps line everything up. After you get all 4 of your bolts started by hand, you can cinch them down. Next, on the installation, is you have to drill a couple of holes on each side of the frame rail. Then you can install your plate and hardware supplied in the kit. Once we get our control arms in place, we need to head on over to the table to put some spring in our step. Who writes this stuff? I've got to assemble my coilovers real quick so that we can move on. With this Riley Motorsports setup, you've got a few options depending on your needs and the purpose that you're building the car. Now, if you're going to take one to the drag strip, well, you may be choosing something like what we've got. But if you're going to a road course or maybe even a hot street car, you may want to choose something different. But what's great about this whole setup is you have those options. With all these trick parts, this isn't a final install. It's essentially a glorified mock-up. We're wanting to make sure everything fits as it should and we don't find anything odd. All these parts will be coming out for an engine bay makeover. Now the last thing that I'm going to be bolting on to the front end of our upgraded suspension here is going to be the optional sway bar. If you were choosing to go down the path of drag racing with your build, well, there's really no need for one of these and it's not a have to. And these things can also limit the amount of transfer of weight to the rear of the car. Plus this big hunk of metal, it's kind of heavy. Now with our ride, we are going to stretch this thing out on the highway and one of these is going to give us some benefit. I'm going to go ahead and bolt this thing on and then we can pretty much count all this done. After getting this Riley Motorsports altercation front suspension in place, it's easy to see that we have taken our Road Runner to the next level. Next on Detroit Muscle, we put some new shoes on our ride and check out the stance of our lean and mean machine. While you guys were gone, I went ahead and finished up the suspension on our Road Runner, tackling the front and the back side. You may also notice that we've upgraded our rear axle. What we're running now is a Mosier Engineering muscle pack that we picked up from Summit Racing, and it is one trick piece. We wanted to keep it all Mopar, so an 8 3/4 nodular center section was mandatory. We combined that with a Detroit Locker True Track, custom alloy axle shafts, big bearing ends, and some big wheelwood brakes. Plus, we opted for the black powder coat. While we're on the subject of the brakes, we're going to jump on this end and take care of the front. Now, our Road Runner from the factory came with drum brakes all the way around. These will stop you and slow you down, but whenever it comes to performance, well, there's a lot better options out there. Also, with our Riley Motorsports setup, this front spindle is of the Mustang II design, and that itself is going to require us to upgrade the brakes. Now, we went to Summit for a whole new setup. It comes with an aluminum hub that's going to save us some weight. The brake surface is drilled and slotted, and we have 6 piston calipers. First order of business to getting these on is I need to install a bearing and a seal. You know, you've got a bearing, a washer, a castle nut, and a cotter pin. But I've got a question for you. How do you guys bend these things? Is there a right way? Is there a wrong way? This is the way I was taught by my old man. It's neat and tidy. With a high-end kit like this, assembly usually goes pretty smooth. You've got a couple of brackets and a few pieces of hardware and so on. Plus, they've got good looks to boot. Whenever it comes to setting the tone of the attitude of your ride, your wheel choice has a huge effect on it. We wanted ours to make a statement like those of you walking around with a mullet. It needed to have business up front, party in the rear. So we've got some narrow pizza cutters for the nose and some wide rollers for the backside. We've decided to go with a set of wheels from Billet Specialties. These wind lights definitely look the part. They're engineered with high performance in mind, like their knurled beadlock that drastically reduces tire slippage. Combining these with a pair of Mickey Thompson ET Street SS tires ensures we'll have plenty of bite on the road or the racetrack. That's enough jawing for now. Let's get this thing on the ground.
Well, Tom, I wasn't sure about this wheel and tire combo, but now that we got them mounted, I think she's gonna look pretty wicked.
Oh man, yeah, I can't wait to see this thing on the ground if you want to do the honors.
You got it.
This This transformation will be some work, but with the sweat from our brow, a few high-performance components, this thing is going to be one sweet piece of Detroit muscle when we're done. It's time to go home. If you want to learn about this build and a whole lot more, visit PowerNationTV.com. We'll see you guys next time, and remember, keep it between the ditches.
From a forgotten, burned-up salvage yard engine to a power plant for a classic Mopar.
This Gen 3 Hemi rises from the ashes on today's engine power.
Welcome to Engine Power. You may have noticed that we have been doing quite a few fuel-injected engines as of late.
Yeah, we did an AMC 304 with port fuel injection. We did 2 LSs, one was naturally aspirated, one was supercharged, and we did that 5-liter Coyote that was supercharged. That was pretty sweet.
It was. Now we have a new project in the shop for all of you Mopar lovers. This is a Gen 3 6.4-liter Hemi, and you may think we're going to go ahead and fuel inject this one as well, but we are going old school carburation on this one, and for a good reason.
Recently, the Detroit Muscle Crew went looking around Stevens Performance, the world's largest Mopar salvage yard, searching for a new project vehicle. Tucked away among 60 acres of rusted metal was a '69 Road Runner from California in solid shape. After loading it up and hauling it back to the shop, it was time to get started.
This project will respect its Mopar heritage while updating some components like the suspension and engine. That's where we come in. Mark and Daniel showed us this Gen 3 Hemi in questionable condition. Despite its appearance, we jumped at the opportunity to put a bit of modern muscle into a piece of automotive history.
This engine actually came out of a burned up vehicle at a salvage yard, and according to the tag, it's from a 2016 Ram 2500. Now, obviously, it's in really rough condition, so we're gonna have to go over it, do a few checks, and then maybe we'll get it running.
It's a big maybe. Wiring harness, who needs that kind of stuff? The first thing we do to any salvage yard engine is to pull out the spark plugs and check their condition. These have some rust on the threads and some carbon deposits, but overall, not bad. Another test we will do is a cranking compression check. This can tell you if the piston rings are in good shape and if the valves are sealing up. Make sure you save these.
Yeah, we're gonna need these for the next engine. It's like 220.
Okay.
Not bad.
No, that's good. Let's do the rest. And
Yep.
there was no clanking or anything, so check the rest of them.
Yep. Dang, that's the best one yet, 275.
Well, it'll start to get better. The cam, because you know it's locked in its fully advanced position, it's going to be high, and it'll start to get better because the more we turn this over, the better it's going to get, because I don't know what's underneath. This had literally gloves shoved in the intake ports, so there might be a little bit of stuff under the seat. So the more we make it rotate and the more we actually
work it loose,
it's going to get better. So,
well, hey,
we'll have to recheck those. I bet you those other two are.
Oh, I bet they're up now.
I bet you they're up now. Yeah.
But that's promising, so I feel better.
Yeah. Next, we'll drain what's left of the oil. It's not a surprise that it contained a decent amount of water from sitting outside.
Look at that. Oh, yeah.
Since we've decided to get this engine running, we're gonna have to go ahead and use some of our new parts now. But an important thing to note is that we did remove the EGR cooler because it was hitting the backing plate on our dyno, and so we had to install a block-off plate on the exhaust. But other than that, we should be good to go. You know, we're kind of letting the cat out of the bag early on our choice of induction. We are using Holley's high ram lower intake manifold designed for Gen 3 Hemis. Even though it was made for fuel injection, it also works great with carburation. A top with a single square bore carburetor flange will get us going. Since this engine didn't come with any functional accessories, we had to add an alternator and an idler pulley in order to get a belt on to spin the water pump. Finally, we'll add a set of used stock coil packs.
In order to run this engine as it sits, we will be installing one of Holley's Terminator X kits. Now I know what you're saying, that is an EFI system, and you are correct, but that system will also run the ignition side of a carbureted engine extremely well. And the benefit of that is, if they ever want to go to fuel injection at a later time, all they have to add are the injectors and the throttle bodies, and they are good to go. Like every other Terminator X we've used, it is a simple plug-and-play operation that makes it easy to get your engine running. Smooth. Up next, that's the sound we like to hear. Woo!
We've gone ahead and changed the oil and filter on our engine, but you saw what came out and the oil was pretty rough from sitting in the junkyard so long. So the last thing we'll be doing is adding some seafoam motor treatment. This works in either gas or diesel engines, and in the fuel system it can help stabilize the fuel for long periods of time, remove water, and clean out any debris. We'll be putting it in the oil, where it'll clean off some of the parts and also break up and clean out any debris that may be sitting in the oiling system. Now, seafoam treats up to 16 quarts of oil, but since this is an extreme case, we'll be using the whole can.
All right.
Ready?
Junkyard fabulous.
Let's see if it starts.
It has oil pressure.
Heck yeah.
Oh, I feel so much better now. Look at that. I cannot believe that.
That's awesome.
Now, it had smoke coming out of it because there's some stuff in the cylinder, but
yeah.
and that immediately cleaned up.
Other than that.
That immediately stopped.
It's running on all 8, no leaks. The no leaks part is what I can't believe because it's all crusty and burnt up. You know, I thought the valve covers would drip.
Well,
but so far, no leaks, which is awesome. Yeah, it looked like the intake took most of the fire because everything underneath was like just dirty, you know, not crusty or melted, just dirty. So, man, that's lucky, but that's awesome.
Let's go something easy, 25 to 5, 600 a second.
Yeah.
That puts a minimal amount of load on it.
And again, we don't really know anything about it, so who knows, but.
We could destroy it right here. No,
yeah, you know, maybe, probably not. I think it'll be okay. We have a little temp in it. I just kind of want to see if it'll do it.
Pull.
Dang. Not bad.
That's
not bad.
It kind of flailed around a little bit, but made 361 horse and 409 pound-feet. It's up to temp. Let's run it a little bit more just to get the seafoam through it, and then let's just kind of drain the oil out.
You know the seafoam is working because we put clean oil in and dirty oil came out. Good job, seafoam.
Before we wash the engine, we'll get it ready by pre-soaking it with some foaming degreaser. To clean our engine, we're using a Bauer 2300 PSI brushless max performance electric pressure washer that we picked up from Harbor Freight. Pressure washers are invaluable around the home and shop for a variety of uses, but since this is engine power, you can guess what we're going to use it on.
It comes with 4 different nozzles to choose from, and since it uses a brushless 13 amp electric motor, it provides high performance, longevity, and is way quieter than a gasoline version. To get into the tight spaces, we'll finish off with a 25-degree nozzle. With a 25-foot hose and a 35-foot 110-volt cord, this Bauer pressure washer makes your cleaning job that much easier. You can get yours at your nearest Harbor Freight.
I got the steering gear back here.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. To start this engine transformation, we have to strip it down first. Don't break, don't break, don't break. It comes apart relatively easy with no big surprises. Yeah, karate chop it. The leftover oil in the pan looks a lot better than the first time. Look how clean that pickup is.
Yeah.
Look how clean that screen is. That's always a good sign. Nice. Probably clean it up and reuse it.
I think we have a new one. I don't think we need to go that extreme.
The rotating assembly looks good, but we want to check the bearings to be sure. If the rest look as good as this, we are good to go.
Because of rust in some of the threads, the spark plugs were pretty gnarly coming out, but luckily, none of them broke. I know, that's hurtful. That's hard to listen to. We hope the cylinders look good, but on a salvage yard engine, you just never know.
The big reveal. Crosshatch in the cylinder.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's really nice actually. That's all the way around.
This engine was relatively low miles.
Yeah, it must have been. Up next, the Hemi gets a bigger cam, some valve train upgrades, and fresh induction. Then it's dyno time.
Oh man. That's a little juicy. It doesn't taste bad though. We've gone ahead and torn the engine all the way down to short block form to finish our inspection. We know the cylinders look great, so we checked the bearings and they look perfect. The next thing we will do is take out our valve train. This is the factory VVT setup. There's a spring inside this that holds the cam in its most advanced position. In this case, the cam was at 102 degrees of intake centerline, and we know that the cam's lobe separation is 116 degrees, so the cam was in 14 degrees advance when we were running it on the dyno. Now that's why the power was great down low but fell off up top. We're going to keep the cam phaser, but we'll lock it out so it doesn't affect camshaft timing.
The camshaft will be upgraded so the stock bump stick can be removed. If any engine we've built recently could use a visual improvement, it's this one. After laying down primer, the block receives 3 coats of Chrysler Hemi Orange. We picked up a set of used salvage yard valve covers, and after thoroughly scuffing them and wiping them down with lacquer thinner, they get an orange finish as well. Next, we'll lock out the phaser. Comp's lockout kit comes with a special tool which relieves spring pressure, allowing us to remove the fasteners on the back side. The lock simply drops into place and is wedged outward with a pipe plug. This keeps the phaser from moving during operation.
The new camshaft is from Comp. It's a little bit bigger and will move the power band higher in the RPM range. It has more lift and duration with 222 degrees of duration at 50 thousandths lift on the intake and 230 degrees on the exhaust. Lobe separation angle is 115 degrees. Once the timing set is bolted into place, we'll install the tensioners and remove the pin to put the chain under pressure. Next, we degree the cam, and the intake centerline comes in at 108.5 degrees, which is 6.5 degrees advanced.
During installation of the oil pump, we'll use 3 1,500 shims to ensure proper alignment.
Oh.
Now we can move on to the valve train. The lifters and trays have to go in before the heads can go on. We're replacing the stock springs with a conical set from Comp Cams. They have an increased spring rate of 485 pounds per inch to handle our more aggressive camshaft. We also got this Powerhouse specialty valve spring compressor from Comp. This simple tool makes changing the valve springs on Gen 3 Hemis a breeze.
We got a set of Cometic MLS head gaskets from Summit Racing Equipment, which will seal up the stock cylinder heads. Using ARP bolts, the 12mm fasteners are torqued to a final torque value of 100 pound-feet, and the 8mm bolts are torqued to 28 pound-feet. Why do sometimes people fall asleep when they're drilling stuff?
I don't know.
Because the drills are so boring. We'll reuse the stock push rods. With a little high-pressure lube on them, they can slide back in. Since they are under valve spring pressure, the stock rocker shafts are gently and evenly tightened down before being torqued.
The springs are coated with valve train assembly spray to protect them during startup.
Installed.
We got a new OEM car-style timing cover because the Holley swap components are designed to use that one over a truck style.
Since the engine will live in a vintage muscle car where space is at a premium, we'll install an oil filter block-off plate and run a remote oil filter on the dyno. The Holley swap pan kit comes with a center sump pickup and windage tray. After putting some silicone on the parting lines of the block, we'll install Holley's cast aluminum pan made for B-body Mopars. Once we get this Hemi hooked up, we'll find out what it can do in the cell block.
Up next.
That is slick. I can't believe they flow this good.
Before we can get our engine running, there are a few original parts that we're going to have to replace. We're going to be changing out our water pump, our alternator, a tensioner, our idler pulley, and a few sensors, and we chose the Duralast brand for their higher quality and improved durability. Duralast has a full lineup of parts covering most vehicles on the road, and they include brakes, alternators and starters, suspension components, batteries, and over 750 types of vehicle electronics. Parts like alternators and starters are offered new or remanufactured, where Duralast improves on the OE design to fix common failures and then triple test them to ensure that they meet or exceed original equipment performance. If you want to look at all the parts Duralast offers, you can go to duralastparts.com. With such wide coverage of electronic components, it's easy to find the right Duralast sensor for your project.
Like Frankie mentioned earlier, we did let the cat out of the bag on what induction we were using, but that was necessary to get the engine running to make sure the engine actually had oil pressure and was functional. Since then, we have changed it up. We've removed the single 4-barrel top and replaced it with one that accepts two 4150 style carburetors and topped it off with two QFT Black Diamond 750s. The nice thing about all of the Holley high ram lower intake manifolds is that the tops are interchangeable, so you can run a front-facing fuel injection, carburetors, or anything you want. It's a simple change. Now, this specific application called for two 4-barrels sticking out of the hood, so it's old school tunnel ram goodness. Because the manifold is O-ringed, it slides on and seals up with no problems. The Holley alternator relocation bracket works great when you need more clearance to fit a modern power plant into an older car.
With Duralast alternators, all the wear components are replaced, not just rebuilt. Parts are tested at component, subassembly, and finished stages. Holley's power steering adapter kit gives you that extra clearance you need with this popular swap.
We've already run this engine on a Terminator X system, so there's just a couple of simple connections to be made. And with the belt put on, we are ready to run. Since this engine will power Detroit Muscle's Road Runner project, we wanted Tommy here so he could hear it run. Are you ready?
Yes, sir. Fire this thing up.
Now, what's cool about this one is everything's stock architecture. I mean, essentially the short block is a bone stock short block.
Yeah.
Bone stock heads, we put springs on it, but a cam and a manifold change. So,
yeah, but huge difference for just those components.
This is a huge difference.
Totally different engine.
Okay, so here we go.
Sounds good.
That is slick. I can't believe they flow this good. Okay, look at that. 540.7 at 6,600 and a 494.4 at 5,200.
Man, that ain't too bad at all.
That is mean. Again, that's a stock cylinder head.
Yeah, I mean, like, in this thing, It's up a ton over what, I mean, even off the stock numbers, this thing is way up.
Yeah, now,
it's crazy.
The truck engine's rated at 410, and again, we're turning accessories. You take all the accessories off that and just have like an electric water pump on this thing, it'd make probably 10, 15, 20 more. I know you're wanting between 5 and 550, so 540 is a pretty.
That's pretty close.
That's pretty close.
Pretty close.
I love it. So you guys are gonna have some fun with this one.
Heck yeah.
For information on anything you've seen today, you can go to PowerNationTV.com.
Today on Detroit Muscle, we pamper the engine bay of our Road Runner so our Hemi power plant will pop when it's dropped in. And we also get locked and loaded with installing a pistol grip shifter, aiming for maximum Mopar magnificence. Hey guys, welcome to Detroit Muscle. If you're into high performance Hemis, snatching gears with a pistol grip, and shiny paint, what we have up our sleeve is gonna tickle your fancy because this big hunk of Detroit power is going in this thing today. On our Road Runner, we aren't planning to run a hood on this thing, so a pretty engine bay is a must for our final product. This high tower Hemi looks impressive. In there, not so much. Joel and I have some work to do. Now we've done a small amount of disassembly here on the front to help the painting process go a lot faster. Got some of it out of the way. Now I've also been spending some time kind of assessing our surface, and I've hit what I refer to as a moral dilemma. Now what needs to happen to do a repair by the book under the hood is all of this material should be removed. Because, well, a lot of this filler, well, for one, has been exposed to the elements for quite some time. Also, the primer that's on here probably come out of a rattle can, and that's usually lacquer-based stuff. But in our situation, check out the rest of the car. It's got patina on it. So what we're gonna do is mow this down with some aggressive paper and then bury some bad decisions in some polyester primer. Then we'll sand that and paint it, and it'll look like $1,000,000. The problem with doing it this way, well, the repair won't last as long as it should. While Joel's finishing up taping, I'm gonna go ahead and get some primer mixed up. Now what we're gonna be applying is polyester primer. It's more or less a sprayable form of body filler. It mixes 4-to-1. This one's direct to metal. All we gotta do is fill the gun up, we can get to spraying. Well, we let our Road Runner hang out overnight to make sure that that primer was good and dry, because Joel applied several coats trying to hide a bunch of these fender well uglies. After that, we're gonna do some hand massaging of some 180 grit paper, and then we're gonna seal this thing and paint it. Now, I know a few of you painters out there are probably cringing at the thought of painting over top of 180 grit scratches. Normally, the rule of thumb is 320 dry or 400 wet. But in our application, a patina car, the engine bay, well, this'll work.
It's a bit excessive. There's a big low spot. Gotta make sure it's in there. Filled up good.
After a few hours of some quality time with Joel and some sandpaper, we're ready to start applying our first coat of black. It's it's going to be some epoxy primer. This will seal off that polyester and help hide some of those scratches left by that 80 grit gnarly paper. Well, everything is all flashed off. Now it's time to spray on the shiny. Well, there you have it. We spent a couple of hours doing some prep, spent a few $100 on some painting supplies, and I have to say, for our investment, we've got a whole lot of return on it. So what do you think?
You know, honestly, it'd been a minute since I laid down any polyester primer, but that stuff laid down smooth, it sanded out clean, and I think the results speak for themselves.
Could be that you're just looking at the side that I sanded. Coming up, if you're pondering a Hemi swap, we'll give you our plan of attack for a late model transplant. Now there's one term that if you own a Mopar that gives you a sense of pride if you can associate it with your car, and that is, it's got a Hemi in it. And that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to install this late model power plant into our 69 Road Runner. Doing a conversion like this piques the interest of a lot of folks, but at the same time intimidates the heck out of them because there's quite a bit that can go into this install. So why would somebody want to do something like this? Well, there's a few reasons. Late model power plants usually make more power more efficiently, which translates to longer life, more performance, and even better fuel mileage. This pretty Hemi didn't start off looking like this. We bought this thing out of a salvage yard. I was told it was involved in a friction fire. That's where your pocketbook and payment book get too close together, causing detrimental injury to your vehicle. The guys in Engine Power cleaned this thing up, sprayed on some new paint, threw in a camshaft and some springs, and then locked her down to the dyno to see what it would make. 550 horse ain't too bad.
She ain't going nowhere.
That engine fell right into place, just as smooth as butter, and a lot of that came from the design from Riley Motorsports, our front suspension setup. And what they did is they located our new engine in the exact same location as a stock like 440 or 383. And what you would want to do to keep in mind if you were going to make your own mounts, and that would be the center line of the crankshaft and the surface where the transmission and engine both meet up. Once you get the engine in place, it may give you a sense of accomplishment, but in all reality, this is where all the work begins, because now you have to take all the operating systems of that engine and make them work in perfect harmony. Kind of like the radiator. A replacement radiator for a 69 Road Runner has an inlet on the top passenger side and an outlet on the lower driver side, where our 6.4, both of them are on that side, the passenger. So to make this one connect to that one with a stock unit, you're going to have to be a bit creative, build you a hose, and so forth. There are companies out there that make Hemi conversion radiators with both of them on the same side, which will make your life a whole lot easier. The next thing I want to talk about is your alternator. Now what we're running is a relocation kit that we picked up from Holley. It moves it up and out of the way. From the factory, the alternator would be located in this area, and the problem with it being like that is interference. You'll hit your frame rail. So to try to make a stock piece work, you're going to have to get to slicing and dicing. With that one, it bolts right into place.
And for those of you that have never wrestled with one of these modern engine conversions, one of the hurdles that you will run into is just trying to find an alternator that works with your ECU. Now, lucky for us, Holley has the solution. This setup actually doesn't require the factory Mopar ECU, so it's going to work with whatever engine control system we decide to go with. All you're going to need is a single wire connected directly to the L terminal, which will supply enough juice to spin the alternator and charge your entire electrical system. Which is going to save Tom and I one heck of a headache, because this setup actually ties directly into our Terminator X engine control system.
So now let's talk about the subject or category that scares people the most with one of these late model conversions, and that would be the wiring. You have a couple of options. One is you can take the stock wiring harness, cut it down, take out all the stuff you don't need, and then have the ECU reworked. Or you can do like what we did and go with an aftermarket setup. This has some convenience to it. One, each wiring connector comes labeled so you know what goes where. Plus all this has instructions to eliminate guesswork. However, your ECU will require a tune, but if you're one of those guys that can't leave things well enough alone, like swapping in a new cam, headers, intake, so on, well, that stock tune wouldn't work. We're not going to get into all that right now. We still got a car to build, but I do need to put that intake on to see what this thing looks like. Here, bud, hold half this awkwardness.
I got you. She may be awkward, but man, it looks cool.
Man, yeah, you got velocity stacks, dual quads, a long-legged intake, and a Hemi. We're on to something.
I think we're going to be upsetting every old lady and dog in the neighborhood by the time we get her hooked up.
Up next, Joel comes through in a clutch, while I'll see if our transmission measures up.
You know, before we even started this build, Tom and I agreed that we wanted this car to make a statement. And man, I gotta tell you, between these fancy billet wheels, this aggressive stance, and that big old nasty tunnel ram sticking out the top, I'd say we're well on our way.
Well, we're gonna continue that mindset throughout from front bumper all the way to the back. So that means we're gonna have to address a portion right here in the middle. And that would be the feel that you receive while sitting in the driver's seat. The way we plan to enhance that emotion is with a manual transmission. You know, there's just something about the ability to dump the clutch, snatch second gear, and then power shift through the rest of them. This car rode off the assembly line as an automatic. You can tell by that big wide brake pedal, and there's no hole or hump on the transmission tunnel for a shifter to be sticking back through. Now, you know, oftentimes with a ride like this, people don't even consider them a muscle car unless they've got 3 pedals. And how could we build this ride without installing a pistol grip shifter? That was easy. Oh, yep.
Oh.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. Now that we got the windshield and the dash assembly out of the Road Runner, I'm going to go ahead and start tearing out that factory brake pedal. Now, believe it or not, it's actually easier to just pull that entire brake pedal assembly out as one complete unit. Basically, you got 5 or 6 bolts up underneath the dash, some extra brackets, some hardware, but I'm going to pull all that out, sandblast them, repaint them, make them look pretty again.
Beauty.
And just like that, no muss, no fuss, the rust is dust. The factory mounting brackets and hardware are all cleaned up, sandblasted, repainted, and look pretty snazzy bolted up to this clutch and brake pedal assembly we got from Stevens Performance. Now, some of you at home might be wondering why we decided to go with a reproduction assembly instead of a factory original. And the answer, quite simply, is time. I know some guys that have tried doing this conversion at home, and it was not easy. So why put yourself through the headache when Chrysler has already done the engineering work for you? Although this particular Road Runner didn't come with a manual transmission, a lot of them back in the day did. So you already know the parts are out there. It really just comes down to whether or not you want to spend the extra time and elbow grease sprucing up a factory original part that you pulled out of a junkyard, or if you just want it to bolt right in place when you pull it out of the box. Me personally, I prefer the latter.
A Road Runner with a stick in it from the factory would have had a 4-speed in it, which is plenty cool, but there's a lot better of an option out there today. With our trans swap, we're going to be adding an overdrive. This piques the interest of quite a few folks because it can make your ride a lot more enjoyable to drive because it dramatically lowers the RPM level when you shift into the extra gear. To do an upgrade like this, there are a lot of pieces to the puzzle to get the job done correctly. There are your obvious parts like your flywheel, pressure plate, and clutch disc, but it's those little pieces that always cause you the most heartache. This ProFit kit that we picked up from American Powertrain saves you all that pain. The centerpiece to this swap is obviously the transmission. We're going to be running a Tremec TKX that our buddies have doctored on. It puts everything in a sweet spot. The shifter isn't so far forward that it slaps the dash or so far back that it's uncomfortable and awkward. Another great thing about these 5-speeds are the physical size. We've got a 727 automatic like what our Road Runner would have rolled out of the factory with. Now if you look at the case and the tail housing, you'll notice everything flows together relatively well, and it has a small package and it's nice and tight to the shaft that runs throughout the middle of the tranny. When you're doing an automatic to manual swap, it can give you the sense that you're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, and the only way you can get it to work is with some whittling. Now with that TKX, cutting is mandatory, but it's minimal. Up next, we set our sights on installing Roadburner's gearbox with a wood grain grip that will trip your trigger. The next thing that we need to do is measure from the surface here on the transmission to where this clutch release bearing is going to ride. What we're looking for is 150 thousandths. That's the ideal setup. Technically, the tolerance is between 100 and 200, but that's what we're going for. The first part of the equation we need is the distance from the bell housing to the fingers of the pressure plate. That gives us 3.886. Next, we'll measure the distance from the release bearing to the transmission, which is 3.749. So now let's see where we're at with our two numbers. Well, we're at 137. The sweet spot is 150. That's pretty close. And we really can't get to that 150 number without having to do some machining because there's no shims behind here. The next thing we need to do now is basically cut us a hole for this pistol grip to protrude through that transmission tunnel, and then we can finally put this thing in. So what do you think?
Should fit just fine.
If it won't, we'll just cut a bigger hole.
Correct. To make the cut in the transmission tunnel for our new shifter linkage, I'm going to be using our new flex head reversing cutoff tool we got from Matco. It has a quick action rear reversing collar to help keep sparks away from your face, and a 3-way flex head that can change from a neutral position to 25 degrees up or down to help you get into those hard to reach spots.
Do you think your hole's gonna make it fit into place just right?
I think it's going to be slipped right in there like a...
Careful with your words. G-rated show.
I think it's going to fit perfectly.
Ah! So close.
If our old Road Runner came from the factory with a mechanical clutch assembly, it would have had a bunch of intricate parts to it, kind of like it was designed by some crazy cartoon coyote. It would have had things like Z-bars and rods and springs and all kinds of stuff going every which direction, which is all well and good and worked fine for back in the day, but it did result in some excessive clutch wear, some cramped up legs, and even some broken seat bolt studs. However, American Powertrain's hydraulic clutch assembly makes driving a manual feel less like a labor and more like a luxury. With this setup, every push of the pedal results in direct movement of the clutch and smoother, more responsive shifting. Now that I got the clutch master cylinder bolted in, it's time to go ahead and link it up to the pedal. But before I do that, I need to go ahead and calculate my pedal ratio. This is a commonly overlooked yet super important aspect of the clutch pedal assembly. If your ratio is too deep, you risk slamming the push rod into the guts of the clutch master, causing it to implode. Too shallow, and your clutch won't fully disengage, causing erratic shifting. American Powertrain recommends a 6:1 pedal ratio, and I already know that the distance from my fulcrum to my foot pedal is 12 inches, and from the fulcrum to the push rod is 2 inches, so I'm right in that sweet spot. Now, Tom and I are well aware that a pistol grip shifter wasn't available until 1970, but we just couldn't resist. In my opinion, it's one of the most iconic centerpieces to grace the floorboards of any muscle car in history, and it truly gives a Mopar its menacing personality. Check this thing out. The wood grain side handle rests easily in the palm of your hand, giving you the sensation of holding a .44 Magnum, hence the name, Pistol Grip.
Today has been a pretty good day. We've got quite a bit accomplished. Now, when we kicked it off, well, it wasn't all fun and games. We had to kind of break out a 6-pack of some elbow grease. With everything all shined up, we were good to go to drop in that high tower Hemi. And I have to say, that big power plant definitely changes the curb appeal of Road Runner. With that in place, it was time to bolt in the multiplying factor ×5 of the driver's seat, and that would be that overdrive training. Joel, what do you think about that pistol grip?
Man, you want to talk about the cherry on top of the sundae? I think it looks pretty nasty in there. Can't wait to start jamming through some gears on the blacktop.
Yeah, it's probably gonna feel pretty sweet with you over there in the passenger seat.
You mean you're not gonna let me drive?
Today, class is in session, and we have several subjects to cover. We show you ways to save some cash and improve your curb appeal with little effort. Patina magic coming up. You know, guys, as we go through life, we all make decisions that can and will have an effect on upcoming events. Some of these in the moment may seem a little minuscule. And some can put you in an awkward situation. And to quote Mr. Newton, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So what did we learn? And whenever it's all said and done, it's simply science. Oh, you got us some drinks for the road.
Got some aspirin too.
That's cool. Let's ride. What I'm referring to is the exterior appearance of your ride. Are you the only like shiny kind of person? Or you all right with primer? Or do you prefer that worn and weathered look? Some people never really consider a car complete or finished until the paint and chrome is polished to perfection.
You ever heard of the term face value? Well, that's when somebody judges your car based solely on the appearance.
You know, show reflections are great, but there's a few drawbacks. 1, they're expensive. 2, it's got a lot of upkeep. And 3, think about it. You always get a little nervous when someone gets too close. There are ways to make Mother Nature's handiwork look a whole lot better, and some of the techniques used are old school. This tip came from an older friend of mine that managed a used car lot, and this is a trick that they used to do back in the day to brighten up the color and rejuvenate that faux wood grain on their inventory. Now these 3 look completely different. My favorite, just by rubbing oil on the side of the car, is the transmission fluid. It actually looks deeper than the other 2. I'm just curious how long this is gonna last and if it's gonna stay greasy. Man, that's way greasy. Now we're gonna label all 3 of these. That way when we come back, we know which one's what. You know the old saying, long hand is better than a short memory.
Now, some of you guys in the woodworking industry are probably familiar with linseed oil, and whether it's kind of cleaning up an old piece of furniture or sprucing up all that old wood grain in the bed of your pickup truck, you've probably used this stuff before, and you're familiar with how nasty and tacky it can be. So it's not uncommon to reduce it down with some turpentine. So just for the sake of science, I'll go ahead and apply this just by itself, and then we'll come back, reduce it, and then we'll do it on a different section of the panel, and just kind of see which one gets the better product. Now, just checking out the surface of this old crusty Charger, you got some original patina that, you know, might turn out pretty good. And then we got some really nasty, crusty rustiness. And being a curious cat I am, I kind of wanted to check out and see what this linseed oil does on both surfaces. At first glance, I can already tell the stuff's making a huge difference. And if our reduced mixture looks this good, I'm pretty excited to see what the linseed oil does by itself. And just like Tom did over there, I'm gonna go ahead and mark my mixtures for future reference.
This last product that we're going to be applying is an actual polymer paint sealant. It's designed to, you know, protect your paint. Now, I'm going to do it two different ways. I'm going to just spray it on back here in the back, and then up here, spray it on and then wipe off the excess. I'm curious to see if the amount of product on the front and back has a different sheen to it. I'm curious that this is probably going to work better. It almost seems like I'm rubbing or massaging the material into the surface a lot more. But we'll just have to come back and see. You know, I really am curious to what all this stuff turns out like. You been staying busy?
Oh yeah, you were kidding, man. That linseed oil's kind of nasty.
Kind of nasty? That reminds me, I know a place we can stop.
I don't know if I like the sound of that.
Oh, it'll be fun, trust me. Might need some change though. Coming up, we don't turn the clock back, we crank it up. We have a little bit more paint work that we're needing to take care of on Road Runner. And what I'm talking about isn't the usual stuff. You normally do a bunch of blocking and sanding trying to achieve a perfect reflection. It's obvious that you guys can tell that this doesn't even come close to matching this over here. We can't have it sticking out like an old sore thumb. So we need to give this thing the patina treatment. The paint itself is in pretty good shape. However, it does have a few nicks and chips here and there, and even a couple of spots of rust. To get this to look like that isn't all that difficult. There are a few techniques that you can apply, and some of them are a bit primitive. You just need the foresight of what you're trying to accomplish. You're basically creating a piece of artwork. Can you sense the anger of the artist? It's quite intense. The first thing that we're going to address is the rust. Now, normally with paint and body work, corrosion is a bad thing. But in this instance, we're actually looking for a bit more. So, we got to do some grinding. Obviously, we need some bare steel, so some of that orange paint has to come off. You can use a grinder, paint stripper, or even a carbide bit. It's all up to you and what you're trying to accomplish. We're not going to strip this entire thing, just the spots where we want the rust. To make things rust in a hurry, it don't take much. You need a heat source, a corrosion factor, and an oxygen promoter. So, if you got one of these heating devices, some salt, and peroxide, you're in business. I have painted a simulated rust effect on one of our other projects. All it took was a couple different colors of paint and a brush, but this time we're going authentic. With everything all rusty and crusty, now it's time to move on. On Road Runner, the main paint color is black with orange under it. In some places, like the top of the car, the black is thin and almost worn and weathered away. But on the sides, it's mainly all chipped up and has scratches here and there. This is what we're trying to duplicate. You're probably thinking the next thing we're going to do is paint this entire panel black, and then we're going to get all crazy and show it some corporal punishment and make it look all bruised and abused. That's really not the case. I have a technique here that I want to apply that's a bit more refined. However, it does cause you to think a little backwards. We're using some petroleum jelly as a congealed form of masking tape. This prevents the paint we're applying from sticking to the surface. Sometimes whenever I'm applying this stuff, I like to do it over a relatively large area, apply my top coat, and then wipe it off and check it out and see what it looks like. Doing it that way, it allows you to fine-tune your artwork, because if you don't like what you see, you can just simply apply more of your top coat. Also, painting this in multiple layers, well, it creates a stair-step effect. It's all in what you're wanting to try to do. It's kind of like you've painted over chips and then painted it, and more chips and then you painted it. Once the paint is dry to the touch, all you have to do is wipe off that petroleum jelly. Let's do that, see what this thing looks like. After a quick rub down with some glass cleaner, it was off for the final details. I have one last touch that I want to do that's going to involve some airbrushing. If you'll notice here on the top of the fender, there's kind of a rust stain that runs down the top of it, and I want to continue that as if it dripped down here onto our panel. I also want to kind of complement our rust that we created as that stain look where the water runs down it. Won't take much, but it's definitely going to add some detail. So with a couple of powdered pearls mixed in some clear base coat, we can simulate that aging effect. A little here, a little there, boom. What you looking at? Let me see your grill. The next thing that we're going to address on the outward appearance of our old rusty, crusty bird here is the grill. With this old grill, it's easy to see that it's seen its better days. And I'm gonna guess they were many, many moons ago. With our chrome and bright work, we want it to look fresh and clean, kind of like our bumper. You can obviously tell that it's been swapped out. Up here, we've got some work to do. When these Plymouths rolled off the assembly line, the grill was definitely a focal point. Mopar started with an anodized aluminum shell and gave it multiple colors and textures to increase the appeal. Around the headlight openings, they used a dark gray metallic color with a rough texture. Then, to add a bit of detail and to create some cool effects, some semi-gloss black was used. If you look close, those two chrome rectangles seem to be floating. Now what we're about to do is what I refer to as a shade tree restoration. With our grille and headlight bezels having that anodized coating, to replicate that usually requires the help of a professional. There are companies out there that reproduce these, but maybe it's not in your budget, or we all know that there has been some supply chain issues. So for you chalk mark style guys out there, what we're about to do isn't correct for your application. However, this procedure is going to make these pieces stand tall when we're all said and done. So let's check out what we're working with. Our headlight bezels really aren't in that bad a shape. There are a few nicks here and there as expected, kind of like this big one where the hood has actually came in contact with it. Now, as for our grille, it's about the same except for we've got a rather large dent here, But that's all swell and good. We'll just have to massage this stuff out first thing. Shoot, these things look a whole lot better just getting all that old paint off of them. The next thing that we're going to do is spray them down with some self-etching primer and then follow that up with some filler primer. There are a few little blemishes here that have some nicks and stuff on them. I'm going to use some sandpaper, mow them down first, then we can get to priming. Now we're also going to be using this stuff inside of our big fancy prep station. And you don't have to have one of these, you just need to make sure wherever you do it is a well ventilated area. If you're wondering why we're applying etch down first, it's actually to improve adhesion of our coatings. Self-etching primer has chemical adhering properties along with mechanical. Now we're going to be applying some filler primer. This helps to fill in those nicks and chips, small imperfections. Now it's better to apply this stuff with several light coats. Don't try to cover it in one heavy coat. One, this allows it to dry actually faster and more thoroughly. I feel like a graffiti artist. After a few rounds of priming and sanding, our headlight bezels and grill shell is really turning out slick. The next thing we're going to be doing is applying our color. I'm going to be using some black, some charcoal metallic, and even some simulated chrome. Now with this, I'm going to apply those in a different sequence from the headlight bezels to the grill shell because of the complexity of the shape of them. We're going to apply a cool little paint technique here on this silver that we just sprayed on. Now I have let this dry for about an hour, but what we're going to do now is give this a simulated brushed effect. I'm going to use a little gray scuff pad here, and basically all you do is drag it right across the surface. You don't want to press down too hard, and you also don't want to do it in multiple directions because it kind of gives it a crosshatch effect. I also like to use a gray and red pad. They have different grits to them, thus creating different depths of scratches. The last step to this little do-it-yourself project is going to be applying the top coat, or what oftentimes is referred to as a clear coat. This will give our parts quite a bit more depth and luster. The results are in. Minimal effort spent plus experimentation equals drastic improvement. We're definitely not in the office today. We're down in Stevens Performance checking on a science experiment that we're in the middle of.
That's right. We basically applied a bunch of goo to some old cars. We're going to see which one gave us the best result. We're going to use it on the Road Runner project.
Speaking of project, that's what this old thing is. Roll that window back up.
I don't know. It's kind of a peach.
Oh, she's something. A lot of fancy stuff, isn't it?
Who needs sunny beaches in Florida when you got a view like this?
Now this first car is where I applied a whole bunch of lubricants, which is basically motor oil, transmission fluid, and even some penetrating oil. Really, it just looks like we cleaned it. This one here on the back where the transmission fluid is, it looks a little bit more greasy. Don't really have much of a stickiness to it, but the transmission fluid does look the best, but I don't think I want to go down this path. So what'd you do up here on this one, boss?
Well, you can kind of see right here, This section's a little bit shinier than the rest of the car, and this is just linseed oil by itself. And then on this back part is a 50-50 mixture of linseed oil and turpentine. At first glance, looks like the shines are pretty similar. This one's got some stickiness.
Back here on the back, it almost looks like the green is a little more concentrated. I wonder if that turpentine worked as a cleaner, but they are really close to the same, but suck that it's sticky. Joel, on this old yard bird here, if you will, I've sprayed on that polymer net shield. And on this one, I sprayed it on and wiped it off. Back here, I just simply squirted it onto the quarter panel. Up here, it's really not sticky at all. And that red under the decal does look a lot better. It's not all faded out, yet not too shiny either. What do you think?
Yeah, there's a clear difference right there. I mean, back here, it's way more shiny. Almost too much, really.
Is it sticky at all?
Just a little bit.
Let's go further and get back to work.
Let's do it.
Believe it or not, one of the main reasons we picked this exact car is the look and condition of the paint. We wanted a ride that looked battered and abused. With Patina, the color can be somewhat rejuvenated, and that was the whole reason we took that field trip down to the Mopar Cemetery. And to basically really bring it back, you have to exfoliate the surface. Laying on top is a bunch of dead paint, giving you that dull gray reflection. Now, you don't want to get too aggressive here. You're just trying to take off that top layer. And just like whenever you're preparing for a night out on a town and you want to look your best, it's time to take a bath. Our plan of attack on cleaning this thing is super simple. We're going to take the hose pipe, wet the surface, and then spray the body down with some heavy-duty degreaser and cleaner like you would pick up at a home improvement or even a parts store. And after it sets for a little while, we're going to scrub it down with some of these old grease rags. And it's pretty cool to watch. You'll actually get to see some of that dead paint wind up into the floor. Now, if you want some words of wisdom as far as the key to success here, about all I can tell you is, you better be prepared to use some elbow grease. So after that little science experiment that we did down there at the salvage yard, the conclusion that we came up with is we're going to be using Sonak's polymer net shield. This will give us the look that we want with the added benefit of some paint protection. And application of this product is as easy as it gets. To completely coat a car, it only takes about 15 minutes to apply. You want to do this in small sections, normally a 2-foot by 2-foot square. You don't want the surface that you're using this on to be hot. It needs to be cool to the touch. It's easy to see that we went from ashy to alluring. Check it out, our old road burner definitely looks a whole lot better.
Plus, it doesn't have a sticky or greasy feel like some of those other options had. If anything, she's soft to the touch.
You know, I think we got quite a bit accomplished for the amount of effort we spent.
Yeah, so what do you want to tackle next?
I'm thinking probably a sandwich.
Sounds good to me. No, we still got rock, paper, scissors on who's gonna wire this thing.
We did, and you lost. Today on Detroit Muscle, we dash towards the finish line on Road Burner. Don't stop there. Joel and I play around with some retro vinyl, and we turn up the heat on our interior. Man, oh man, do we have some information for you all. Next thing we're going to get into is some insider trading. And not to go through this next step would be a downright crime. I'm not talking about breaking any laws. However, we've got to do road burner justice. What I'm referring to is the interior. Yeah, I know road burner has that worn and weathered look, but that's not going to be the case in here. We have definitely dabbled with giving this old Plymouth a race car attitude. One thing that we're not interested in is all those tendencies that can come along with it. And you know what I'm talking about, that ear-piercing sound and everything rattling and so on. Plus, this ride will be on the road way more than a quarter mile at a time. So some really nice interior will go a long way quieting down all that unwanted ruckus. So the first order of business is going to be tackling that old dash.
Some of this stuff will be reused, but some will be headed to the trash. There's nothing wrong with taking a few photos, making notes, and tagging and bagging any items that come off. This era of B-body had a few different style of gauge clusters, and ours may not be the coolest one, but it's still gonna look pretty dope.
What are you doing?
Just finishing up.
That's not what I'm referring to.
Well, with all this talk of insider trading and other illegal activities, some people would like to avoid incarceration and be able to walk out of here without revealing their identity.
That was just a metaphor for installing new interior.
Oh.
Bless his heart. Now, for a few of you guys out there, you know what I mean. Now, with our dash all stripped down to the bare skeleton, we're gonna have to make a couple of repairs. Here on the top of the dash, it's got a big dent, and then we've got some extra holes that was probably for some race car switches or rocket launchers and so on.
All right, ready to get started?
You got some on your shirt there, Slick. Now, this repair is not nearly as dramatic as this awesome montage. We're just plugging some holes, doing a little grinding, welding, some sanding, and that should take care of everything. But hey, who doesn't like some rock and roll?
Well, we got all of our holes welded up, and after a little body and filler work, we're ready to slap on some polyester primer. This polyester primer has saved my skin on many occasions. It can hide those blemishes and smooth things out. After that, I'll top it off with a coat of epoxy and some single stage black.
Coming up, 1,672 piece puzzle. No sweat. Now it's time for us to start refurbishing some of the old pieces that we're going to be reusing on our shiny dash. Now some pieces will be simply replaced, but not all of them. Now with this bezel that's around the gauge cluster, I've got a trick up my sleeve to make it look like $1,000,000. Whenever you're building your play pretty, sometimes you've got to get creative with your ride and your budget. And that's what we're doing with this piece. It is available in the aftermarket, but it's a couple $100. What we're gonna do is spend some time in a couple of Hamiltons, and it's gonna save us a couple of Benjamins. Final thing that we're going to be doing is applying a wrinkle finish paint. Now to apply this stuff, they want you to scuff it and clean it like we did, and then apply 3 different coats in 3 different directions. What that helps to do is have enough material on there for the wrinkle action to work, plus it helps to ensure that you've got all of the panel covered.
Well, we still got a couple pieces that we want to spruce up before we're ready for final assembly on our dash, including this heater vent control panel that has a little bit of oxidation on the outside. And since media blasting would be a bit too aggressive for this application, I'm going to go ahead and just soak it in some liquidated rust dissolver. Now you can pick this stuff up at your local hardware store or auto parts outlet or even the old interweb. Since it's chemically designed to target only rust, it's not going to eat up any of these little plastic pieces or tarnish our original finish. Placing this vent control panel in an airtight sealed plastic bag will help accelerate the diffusion process. This powerful proprietary formulation takes the hard work out of rust removal. We'll leave this to soak for about 2 hours.
Our old switch panel cover is a piece we're going to reuse. Some sandblasting and a fresh coat of trim black makes all the difference. The before and after pics definitely tell the story. Now add a bit of detail with a fresh silver marker on the top of the letters, and it shines like new.
Smells like trash. Looks like treasure though. I like it.
Restoring a complete dash can be a tedious process. There are so many pieces. You've got trim, painted parts, switches, and so on. All of these have to work in harmony. Plus, you want them to look nice when it's all said and done because it's a focal point of the interior. Now on Road Burner, we didn't start with much. But with some TLC, an upgraded Dakota digital gauge set from Summit Racing, and a few restoration components that we snagged from Stevens Performance, it looks pretty good. If we wanted to toot our own horn. Up next, we iron out some problems for now and later. The next interior task that we're going to be tackling can be a bit intimidating, and whenever it's done incorrectly, is downright embarrassing. However, it's also one of those things that whenever it's done right, you don't even notice it. What I'm referring to is the headliner. Now this is just like any other upholstery work. There's some pulling and tugging, some gluing, and some screwing. So whenever you apply those simple techniques, you'll definitely finish with a smile on your face. Now on these older cars, they have what's referred to as headliner bows, and they're what hold the headliner material up. Now, if you're removing an old setup, make sure to number the rods as they come out, maybe from front to back, so that you can return them to the correct position. Now with ours, we didn't really know, so we talked to the guys that know these cars inside and out, and they informed us that you go from the flattish rod up front, moving toward the rear to the one that has the most curve in it. Now to install these, they just simply slide in a hoop or loop that's sewn into the material. Let's start with the back one, bud.
You know, I once thought about starting my own headliner installation business. Decided not to go through with it though. Way too much overhead.
You want to get on that passenger side, I'll hand it over to you.
Sounds good. Why are you cutting on our brand new headliner?
What I'm trying to do is give a little bit of a relief cut here on those rods. What that does is it allows you to pull it tight here on the side. If you don't do that, it kind of bunches up and it just doesn't stretch out right. Whenever you're installing a headliner, the main thing you don't want is wrinkles and ripples. Now there are a few tips and tricks to make your life a whole lot easier. Start in the front and in the center. Then work out to the edges. If this is your first time doing it, I'm going to recommend when you think this thing is pulled tight enough, just pull a little more. How far did it stretch up there?
Oh, it's got to be all the 2 inches. Well, we got our headliner all stretched out from front to back. Few little wrinkles on the sides, but we can work those out later. And we're using a professional grade glue because it has a much stronger bond and it's going to last longer. A little extra coin now, it's going to save us that headache later.
When you're applying the sticky junk, there's no need to hose it on. Apply it on both surfaces, and once it's dry to the touch, it's ready to get stuck. Work a little on both sides as you make your way to the rear window. If you find yourself having a few hard wrinkles, like it being packaged too tight, you can add a little heat to relax those imperfections. At first glance, old Road Runner definitely makes one heck of a statement, and it has nothing to do with practicality. Take a look at those big dual quads and velocity stacks sticking way above the top of the fenders. As for the interior, something a bit more sensible wouldn't be too bad. Adding some soft parts like headliner and so on sure does make riding in this thing on road trips a whole lot more tolerable. So we have a bit more work to do to improve the ambiance. Carpet does a lot more than just cover the floor. It helps to dampen vibration and also lower unwanted temperatures that can be transferred through the floor from the engine, transmission, and exhaust. When you're looking to buy this stuff, you've got a couple of options. One is you can buy it by the roll. This takes some work to make it look right. You cut and hem each piece for a custom tailored look, and when it's done correctly, it's nice. Then there's molded carpet. This makes life much easier. It has a stock look, and this is going to be perfect for us. Now we're not quite ready to nail this thing down yet because we still got some work to do. We've got to trick up our sleeves with our seats, but we haven't got everything back from the upholstery shop. So we're just doing some minor cutting and trimming to rough it in and to gain us some ground. Hey man, can you grab those seal plates so that we can test fit those?
Did you order them?
I thought you ordered them.
So you're not even going to talk to me all the way to Ted's then, huh? You know communication is key.
Coming up, a road trip to check out some rare goods.
Back to our home away from home.
Well, look who's back.
Yeah, we're here because we need something, as usual.
Such as?
I got a small list.
That is small. Oh, but there's a lot of stuff on it.
Think you can help us out?
Yeah, we ought to have all that, no problem.
Show us around.
We can do it.
Follow you, sir.
Boy, you got quite the setup here, Ted. How's a guy even get started in something like this?
Well, you know what they say, necessity is the mother of invention. You know, we were restoring cars and couldn't find parts, so we started hunting parts and finding parts, and it turned into this.
I know this is just a drop in the bucket of what you have as far as, let's call it, used inventory.
You know, some of this stuff is really piled up. You have to dig for whatever you're looking for, but there's some general organization to it.
Now, you have any idea how many cars that you guys actually have?
Somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000. I'm not really sure how many there are. Like I said, I never really gone out there and counted them. That's probably something I need to do, but I haven't done. That'll be your project this afternoon. You can count them.
We'll let Joel, he's the new guy.
Yeah, we'll let Joel do that.
Now, I hear he's pretty good at it. You should get him to organize all these headlight bezels.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
You know, I never knew you even had that much old inventory off.
Oh yeah, yeah, there's a lot of stuff off. That's used parts in there. This building here has got mostly new parts in it.
Holy smokes, Ted.
Now, Ted, I know you've got quite an inventory of reproduction, but you know, the Holy Grail is on this side of the wall. NOS stuff?
Yeah.
That's a bunch of stuff.
And it doesn't grow like it used to. That stuff used to come on a pretty regular basis, but those days are dwindling.
How do you cultivate that stuff, or how do you find it?
Used to, you could go to dealerships and find it, but you hardly ever do that anymore. And some of it's collections that other people are breaking down. Some of it we buy at swap meets. Matter of fact, we got stuff over in the floor that just came in from a meet up in Indianapolis. Some of this exhaust stuff here in the floor, some of it's new old stock, and some of it's reproduction.
Now with the old parts, you keep them around also to help the guys that have the Survivor cars, right?
Yeah, because if you're working with a Survivor car, you don't want to put a new exhaust system on the car per se, because you can tell that it's new. If you've got either new old stock parts that have been sitting around for 45 or 50 years, or nice takeoffs that came off cars, you know, back in the day, that works out real well too.
Now with that Mopar stuff that you're saying the Holy Grail, what do you have that's close by that is purely Mopar, that's aged, but it's still brand new?
This is a grill here.
I want to help the man, but I'm scared if I help him drop it.
If you drop this, you know, you'll have to pay for it. So. There you go. I think we have the original box for this here somewhere. Now there is a reproduction available on this now, but
that's now. If
you've got that 71 Hemi Cuda convertible, you got to have this.
All right. Guess we need to grab that bucket of parts and get back at it.
Well, let's put this back in the box.
Take it back to the shop and hang it up.
Well, you do that too, I guess.
Now, it's no lie that in today's times, that whenever it comes to restoring an automobile, that a person may have to get a bit creative or even compromise. Now, we've hit a little snag with our 69B body. As you can imagine, the front door panels are a lot more popular than the rear. That's why we were able to find these in black, but up front, we're actually going to transform these from bright white to black. First step to a task like this is you have to get things clean. We're using Scott heavy-duty shop towels to aid in this process. They're resistant to solvents and can be used both wet or dry. We're going to have to do a few rounds of cleaning here, and having these disposable rags is handy. Not only for the job at hand, but also cleaning up after the work is done. Well, we had the problem that there weren't any black panels available. Solution, paint some white panels black. Now, for those of you who were wondering why I painted these black panels black again, well, I wanted the sheens to match. I didn't want eggshell in the back and semi-gloss up front. We're far more sophisticated than that. We are well on our way with the interior on Road Runner, and one thing's for sure, it feels good to see the fruits of your labor. A few of the things that we've done today may seem a little bit out of order, but that's okay. Whenever you're waiting on parts, there's still plenty of work to do, and there's no reason to just sit around. Plus, this just puts you further down the road and closer to your end goal. Now all I have to say for you guys to look at the big picture, and from where I'm sitting, looks pretty sweet. Today on Detroit Muscle, we give you some simple hacks to get you amped up about that scary road trip down Electric Avenue that your Detroit iron can't live without.
Tom? You in here? Okay, that's not creepy at all. Hey, Tom! Tom, you in here? Tom? Okay, I get it. Messing with the new guy. Come on, man, it's not funny anymore. You're not gonna scare me. You're not gonna scare me. Whoa! Nope, doesn't count. Nope, you didn't scare me. Nope, I'm not scared.
You should be.
Why?
Because we're wiring the car. Hands down, this next task that we're gonna tackle has to be the most intimidating part of building, restoring, or just plainly working on your projects. So why is that? Well, the electrical system usually has some form of involvement with the operations of majority of the components of your vehicle. You do something wrong, and exorcist type of stuff starts happening. Or even worse, fire and smoke special effects become reality. Then there are electrical gremlins that can be caused by improper alteration. And then that can take hours upon hours to locate, troubleshoot, and repair. And whenever you talk to a shop about working on this, it's gonna be very expensive because time is money. But with a plan, some simple tools, and a little bit of time, wiring isn't nearly as dramatic as one might think. So let's go through a few things that may help you with your project if you're thinking about giving this a go. On Road Runner, we're starting with a clean slate. All that old stuff has been removed. The only wiring that we currently have is the engine harness. Therefore, we have to tie into that and wire everything else up.
All this colorful spaghetti you see spread out across the floor is our electrical system. Now, before any of you guys go looking for a setup for your ride, well, you're gonna wanna ask yourselves a couple of questions. For example, would a universal harness work for your application? Or should you go for something a little more original? The answer to all that has to do with the personality of your four-wheeled treasure. If everything under the hood looked as if it rolled off the assembly line, you probably need something that has more of an OG appearance. But if your ride has a bit more of a hot rod vibe, the tailorable unit would be more of what you're looking for. Oftentimes, guys prefer this way so that they can hide those copper core electric hoses for a much cleaner look.
Another thing to consider is how many circuits are you going to need? Well, that all depends on the power options that you plan to be running.
What we're going to be installing on our Plymouth is what you'd call a semi-direct fit harness, meaning it's got a fuse block and connector assembly similar to what would have came on the car originally. But we are still going to have to cut and terminate a few of those connections.
This allows you to move some of your wiring around with the option to connect to some of your factory components. Now, we're running a late model power plant, which is way different than what that car would have came from the factory with, but we still plan to use the stock switches in our dashboard. If we would have tried to use an OE style harness, it would have taken several modifications to make it work.
A setup like this can also save you a bunch of time because each wire is individually labeled. And to precisely determine which wire is which can be a lot of work, especially considering there's usually more than one red wire in a harness. And to trace and identify wires based solely on their terminals, it's not fun for anybody.
Our upgraded harness has another thing going for it. It has more than enough circuits than we need, which can be convenient if you're looking to do some upgrades later on.
Yeah, at this point, you really want to just make sure that you're making the correct choice for your harness.
You don't want to max out something like this. A few extra circuits now makes additions later way easier.
Coming up,
we expose some secrets on the best way to strip and make a connection.
Well, I bet for a few of you all, you may be squirming in your seat a little bit from the looks of things. Now, that pretty harness that we had stretched out over there in the floor is now kind of just strolled out into our Plymouth. Now, if you're looking to do something like this, there's a few things you should keep in mind.
Just like in the engine bay and throughout the rest of the car, you've got a lot of moving parts in here as well. Between your pedal assembly, your shifter, and even your own 2 feet, you've got more than enough opportunity to get tangled up in your own wiring job. But taking the extra time and care to tuck everything up into the firewall will not only help keep everything nice and neat, but it'll limit that possibility of damaging your harness.
When you're ready to start finalizing those connections, well, you're going to need a few tools to make this process go a whole lot smoother. Kind of like some crimpers, cutters, strippers, and so on. For a little wiring 101, let's talk about strippers. Now, there's several different types out there, but they all basically do the same thing, and that is remove the protective coating to expose the wire. However, there is a wrong way to use them. They have designated places for different size or gauge wires. If you choose the wrong one, you can damage the wire. What it will do is cut into the wire, and that can lead to a poor connection. You can see a few pieces of copper here in the sheathing, and you don't want this. Okay, the next thing, let's say you want to connect 2 wires. Let's start with the most basic way, and that is with the pigtail or rat tail splice. That's where you take 2 or more wires and simply twist them together. A connection like this works, but it has its drawbacks. One is it's not a very strong connection unless it's soldered. If you wrap it with electrical tape, moisture can still get in because of the gap, and it's not very pleasing to the eye. But one thing's for sure, it's easy. Another way you can make a connection is with crimp connectors. These are easy to use and they're gauge specific. Let's start with the wire. You will need to remove some of the insulation. Now with that, all you're trying to do is go about halfway through this connector. You don't need a bunch of wiring sticking out from the end of it. So let's cut some off here. Now, if you look on your connector, there's a seam on it. If you're using the type of pliers with the bump on it, you want to be on the opposite side of that seam. Then all you need to do is take your pliers and clamp it down. This helps to ensure a lot stronger of a crimp. Now, after you're done, give this thing a little bit of a tug. Now, don't get all He-Man on it. You're just checking to see if it's loose. If it is, that can lead to a short. All right, this next thing isn't necessarily mandatory, but it is preferred by many, and that is to solder your crimp. Now to do this, you can use a soldering iron or gun, or what I like to use, and that is a micro torch. This thing helps to speed up the process. Just heat things up a bit, dab with some solder. That will get it done. Now when soldering too much heat, and this stuff can be a bad thing. If you throw the heat to it, you can burn up the protective coating on the wire. And if you pour on the solder, it will basically make the wire solid.
You know, keeping your electrical work nice and neat can really complement your build. And if you don't believe me, take a look at all these wires strung out the front of this car. Kind of rattles the nerves a little bit, doesn't it? And all we're really trying to do is kind of help calm those nerves a little bit so that you guys aren't quite as intimidated by a task such as this. Get your game plan, stay focused, kind of separate the harness out into groups, and start terminating wires from there. You know what they say, the best way to eat an elephant? One bite at a time. After using some of the techniques that Tommy was just talking about over there, the next thing you want to focus on is shielding your work. and you have plenty of options in that department as well. Starting off, good old-fashioned electrical vinyl tape. Now this stuff is actually a pretty good insulator when used properly. And there are a few different styles and colors to choose from that factor in heat, moisture, and vibration. And application is about as easy as it gets. Just simply wrap it around your work. However, I would not recommend it as a standalone repair to severely damaged or unspliced wires. Next up, we have what is called liquid electrical tape, which I would consider more of a problem-solving solution. And in terms of aesthetics, there are far better alternatives. But if your trailer wires fall apart going down the road, this stuff will at least get you home. For premium shielding when it comes to appearance, longevity, and weatherproofing, I would highly recommend heat shrink, especially the kind with the hot melt sealer. Not only does it look cool when you're applying it, it also creates a trouble-free repair that looks nice to boot and makes your wiring job look professional, whether you are or not. And at this point, it could be really hard to gauge how much work we still have to do on this car. And the answer just might shock you. But we are getting down to the wire. All we can do is focus on the current task at hand, and as long as we don't sell ourselves short, we can do it.
Epic fail.
Up next, we hook up with electrifying results.
Well guys, so far our eyes haven't been too big for our stomachs. As you can plainly see, we've been chewing through our elephant bite by bite. Tom tackled the spaghetti up underneath the dash, while I sank my teeth into the front headlight and turn signal assembly. The detailed instructions and color-coded wiring made this process fairly simple and easy. However, some portions have been easier to digest than others. For example, if you've ever wired an engine harness before, you understand the complications involved, especially considering how critical each connection is. I like to compare it as being just as important to your electrical system as the blood vessels are to your body. It carries electricity from one component to the next to ensure everything is functioning in harmony. That being said, it doesn't mean there wasn't a little bit of room for improvement. Using the process of elimination, we were able to trim a little fat and get rid of some of these wires we weren't using, which not only helped ease the headache, but also gave our engine bay a nice, clean, and organized look. Along with that, we're sticking with our hot rod and race car theme by installing the battery inside the trunk of the car. We're also going to go ahead and put in this high output connection kit that's going to work as a junction block between the alternator, the battery, and the starter. This high output connection kit assists your OE style harness to be able to handle a high amperage alternator. A setup like this can come in a variety of different wiring, terminals, boots, and more based on your application. Detailed instructions are also included to help facilitate your installation.
With our dash finally installed, we can move on to the next thing, and that is going to be installing the steering column. And we want to show you a few tips on how to do it properly. This may sound like a straightforward task, but it would blow your mind on how many hot rods that I've worked on in the past that has what could be called a subpar install. And I just don't get it. Why someone would want to skimp on something like this, I can't even comprehend. It's kind of like your brakes. If something goes wrong, well, this stuff can keep you out of harm's way. It's very important for the column to be mounted in a solid fashion on both ends. A column with just one location point is downright dangerous. The column that we're going to be installing is designed to bolt right into place. It reuses the stock upper bracket, it comes with its own lower plate, and it gives us both points like the factory engineered. If you wanted to go with a universal path, well, the column's going to come with a smooth tube, and you're going to have to fab or buy some brackets to mount both ends properly. Column's in, so now let's talk about connecting it to the rack. Now to get this job done, we're gonna have to use a couple of U-joints like this one and a steering shaft. We already have one of our U-joints slid onto the shaft of the rack down here, and we're gonna run up from there and connect to the input side of our steering column. Now what you're going to be looking for is obstructions between these 2 points. Now another thing that you can run into is clearance problems with the motor mounts and frame rails if you're working on some custom application. And just as a rule of thumb, you want at least a ½ inch of clearance around any obstacle. To properly install one of these into this, there's a couple things that you need to keep in mind. One is you don't want to slide the shaft in too far because you'll bottom out and that'll mess up the innards. That's a big malfunction. This will limit the operation range of the U-joint. What you want to do is slide that shaft out to it's basically flush right there on the inside, and that gives you back the swing that you want. Second, with this style joint, everything is held in place with a couple of set screws, and that's what goes in these 2 holes. Once you get everything dialed in perfectly, you want to take and mark where that set screw is going to come in contact with this shaft and make a dimple.
Next, we toot our own horn, Mopar style. Me, me.
We've all probably heard that old saying, it has all the bells and whistles. Well, in the case of our Road Runner, this thing is pretty bare bones. However, it has to have that one piece of Mopar history that this thing came standard with, and that would be that iconic beep beep horn. This small piece of Plymouth magic only came on 2 of their models. That would be the Superbird and the Road Runner. The tone of this safety device sings a familiar song of that bird that was dressed for the occasion, and he wasn't blending to let any grass grow under his feet. The story behind this clever noisemaker is quite interesting. Plymouth had to pay Warner Brothers a healthy sum for the rights to use the sound and likeness of our throttle junkie feathered friend. As for development, rumor has it a member of Mopar Brass was in one of their warehouses and heard the famous note. He followed it to the source, and lo and behold, what they were looking for was on a forklift. Oftentimes, if you're looking to install some form of an electrical accessory onto your ride that it didn't come from the factory with, well, you're going to have to deal with some relays. A relay is basically a switch that allows you to take a low electrical input and convert it to a higher current output. They're used all the time whenever you're running stuff like electric fuel pumps and fans because they take a good bit of juice to make them run. They come in many different styles. You've got 20, 30, 40 amp ratings. You've got some with a tab, some without, and they even make a weatherproof style. To wire up one of these isn't too bad. Let's start with the larger gauge wires. You basically have a higher amperage input and output. The input goes to the battery source, and the output to whatever you're trying to run, like a fan. The relay that we're working with here is referred to as a normally open style. That means it has to be activated to complete the circuit. Relays are available as normally closed, which would operate just the opposite. Then you have your trigger wires. One is a positive input, the other is a ground. And depending how you're wanting, let's say, that fan to operate, well, you're going to have to make some decisions. If you just wanted it to come on with a toggle switch, you could hook the 12-volt input to a power source and the other wire to a ground, and it would work with the flip of a switch. With the relay, you also have the option to control items on the ground side of things. On a cooling fan, you can install a temperature switch. Once it gets to the trigger degree, it completes the circuit and turns the fans on. This is only a small portion of the things that you can do with a relay.
Well, we're just about ready to test fire all the components of our electrical system. And to help feed spark to the heart of this dragon, we're gonna be using a Duralast Pro Power Ultra battery that we got from AutoZone. This particular juice box is an OE exact fit that replaces a factory original. Pro Power Ultras are known for being proven tough. Plus, the impact-resistant construction minimizes damage from inevitable vibration when Tom dumps the clutch and starts whipping the tail on this fire-breathing lizard. Well, I'm not seeing any sparks or blue smoke, so we're off to a good start.
You'll see if everything works like it's supposed to. Horn work?
Horn works. Headlights?
Got headlights.
Cool, we got dash lights. Left turn signal?
Yep.
Right turn signal?
It's blinking.
How about those tail lights?
You only have 2 of them.
Brake lights?
Oh yeah, they got brighter. Guys, we know something like this is a huge task, but if you pay attention, apply some of these simple techniques, and you can accomplish your goals without any hiccups.
Yeah, just take it one component at a time, one wire at a time, and before you know it, you'll be admiring your own handiwork.
Dude, I always get nervous hooking that battery up for the first time.
Yeah, know what you mean. But old Road Runner is getting dangerously close to being done.
Yeah, all we really lack is some exhaust and some fuel. We can basically hit the key and bring this thing back to life. Hey, grab him lights. Today on Detroit Muscle, it's a hodgepodge of odds and ends. We're all over the place, from front to back, inside and out. We get creative with tips to boot. A car is so much more than just 4 wheels and a bunch of parts bolted together. They have their own identity, and their personal traits need to work together like interior, exterior, tone, and feel for it to be considered a perfect package. When they don't, well, your masterpiece can look similar to abstract art. You know the rides I'm talking about. We've all seen them. They stick out like a sore thumb and kind of cross-thread your thoughts, leave you confused, wondering what the heck were they thinking. Now, there's nothing wrong with making a statement. You just have to realize that every component that you screw or glue into place is a small piece to the big picture. With our Plymouth, it's easy to see that it looks more like a delinquent than a modeled citizen. And that's exactly what we were going for. With its rough around the edges exterior, the dinosaur burning power plant that's in plain sight, looking like it could breathe fire at any given moment, and a stance of, it's just waiting to pounce. This may be too radical. Your style may be more shiny paint, velour interior, and cruise control.
Which is totally fine. And if that's the case, well, this Oldsmobile, probably right up your alley. It has plenty of pizzazz in its own right, with its 2-tone paint, bright red pinstripes, and that iconic Hurst Olds banner that just grabs your attention. And if you take a peek at the interior, that lightning rod shifter poking through the center console, well, just a multiplying factor of how much fun you can have sitting in the driver's seat. And these are just 2 examples of why so many people love American muscle. Each one has its own story to tell, and they are far more than just a means of transportation.
This next trick that we have up our sleeve is kind of a custom touch that we're going to add to complement the persona of Road Runner. A while back, we was rummaging around in a candy land of battered and abused Mopars. After checking out a few historic relics in what more than likely is their final resting place, we came up with this rustic idea to let a few of them live on as a nameplate for Road Runner. We collected several letters with different fonts to spell out the word burner to make our emblem. Now we want this thing to have a creepy feel to it, kind of like a ransom note. To get a sneak peek of what our end result could look like, we're going to use an art technique called rubbing. All that is needed is some paper and a colored pencil. After that, we can cut them out and arrange them to see what it's all gonna look like. Not too shabby. Oh yeah, that'll work. With several of our studs broken off, our strategy for mounting these is to use some epoxy. I went ahead and made this little aluminum tray that I'm gonna fill with goo and then press those emblems into place. And now later, after everything sets up, I will bend this thing off. Hopefully it goes as expected. If not, that tray may end up being a part of the artwork. With the posts, I'm just gonna grind them down flush. I'm also going to rough up the back of each emblem to help the bond of the epoxy. With everything all mixed up, it goes in the tray. The emblems take a dip. And I can dial in the alignment. I need some steel shavings to sprinkle over the top, so I grabbed our catch can off the grinder. This will rust up and hide all that glorified glue. This is my mama's method right here. I'm gonna force rust our rear emblem ransom note by using our trusty, crusty concoction. First, I'll hit it with some peroxide, then a dash of salt, and finally, blast it with the heat gun until our logo looks like it's been a part of Road Runner all along. Sure, boy. Stick that dude on now.
Think you can pass glass class? This tip for your ride is free. Well, you can see clearly now, our glass is gone. The windshield in our old Road Runner was in pretty rough shape, so it had to go. The general condition of automotive glass can be classified into 3 different forms. You've got the good, the bad, and the ugly. When it's nice, it gives you a clear perspective of all obstacles in your way. But when it's crummy, it can be blatantly obvious and seem impossible to repair. However, I do know a few tricks of the trade that'll help take your glassware from fouled up to fabulous. A while back, Tom and I disposed of Road Runner's weathered and cracked up old windshield. The gasket was all tore up, it was taped in place, and between all the fractures, swirls, and pock marks, visibility was no guarantee. So, the best thing for that old hunk of laminated glass was to just toss it into file 13. Now obviously running this car without a windshield is not an option. Not only is it illegal in most states, but some would consider it cruel and immoral to risk the possibility of messing up Tom's hairdo. He works really hard on it, you know? So what are your options when it comes to sprucing up the glass in your ride? Well, for us, it was just a matter of tracking down a brand new windshield and getting it delivered to our front doorstep, courtesy of Stevens Performance. However, some of you may not have that same luxury for a variety of reasons. For one, you may be running into the supply chain issues that we've touched on in the past and can't get a proper replacement in a timely manner. Or you're just one of those chalk mark guys that want to ensure some authenticity to the vehicle you're restoring. For example, these old Mopars actually have date-coated glass. You can tell by the inscription here, we have the trademark Chrysler Pentastar, as well as the numbers 6 and 8, indicating this vent window was manufactured in June of 1968. Now, this may not pertain to those of you who look at it as just another piece of glass. And for the rest of you, well, it's just as important as the numbers matching on the engine. Using this raggedy old windshield as our guinea pig, I'm going to be running you guys through a few techniques that I know of that's going to restore some optical clarity back into your whip. I'll mask off 3 different sections that will work as a divider between the different applications. The far one on the end will remain dirty and grimy so that we can reference it later. The middle section will get a bath and some Sonax glass cleaner. What we've noticed about this Sonax formula is that not only does it penetrate the surface and wash away a lot of residue, it also leaves behind a streak-free shine that deflects a lot of future debris. Sonax glass cleaner is even safe to use on your household windows, so you can soak in the rays of a bright, sunshiny day. Now for this last section on the end, I'm going to be doing something that may seem a little unorthodox, but it's a tried and true method that really works. All you're going to need is some quadruple or triple-aught steel wool and some distilled water. Distilled water works as a purified, mineral-free lubricant to help the steel wool glide across the surface, similar to wet sanding a body panel. It scours the area just enough to polish it, but not damage it. The end result is a silky exterior that's smooth to the touch. I'm sure you're all very familiar with what happens when that rubber gasket on your windshield wiper gives up the ghost, starts moving back and forth and making god-awful noises similar to nails on a chalkboard. Not only is it irritating to the ears, but to the eyes as well. To help simulate this optical interference, I'm going to scrape the surface with some 600 grit sandpaper. Then we'll rejuvenate it using this glass polishing kit we got from Summit Racing. To start off, simply dump a few ounces of the supplied Diamond Fast powder into the lid of the container. Add in some distilled water, a few drops at a time, and mix until you get a consistency similar to that of toothpaste. Apply a thin layer of paste over the surface of your pad before finally using a variable speed drill to polish the work area. Spray the distilled water as you go to help reduce friction heat and avoid unpleasant swirl marks. Last step, clean with ammonia-free glass cleaner and declare victory. Depending on the extent of the damage, the amount of time it takes to elevate your glass to first class may vary. And in all reality, these methods really didn't require that much sweat from our brow. And this was in pretty rough shape. Knowing what you know now, just imagine what you could do if you have a decent piece to begin with. Won't know until you try. Excuse me. Is this seat taken?
Under the hood, check. Cool stance, check. Interior finish, nope, not yet. We've been making some good headway and we're getting dangerously close to calling old Road Burner finished. One of the last things that we need to do to check off the list is some seats. We wanted to carry over that racy vibe of our old Plymouth into the interior. Normally with a car built for the track, everything in here gets gutted to save weight. But with our ride, it's gonna be a lot more street than strip. So that's why we wanted a full interior. Road Runners rolled off the assembly line with a tasteful but usually basic upholstery. So a little dressing up and a performance touch would go a long way.
And this old park bench just wasn't gonna cut it. It's heavy, was gonna require a ton of work, not to mention, it's ugly. We were okay with the seats making a statement, but it needed to be the right one. We wanted an aggressive appeal without anything looking out of place. So we had to get a bit creative. After ordering a pair of aluminum bucket seats from Summit, we sent them out to our buddies at Blast from the Past for a subtle custom touch. Then Gil from Speed and Design worked his magic.
This is what we have, a set of jet black seats, front and rear. These buckets give you a pretty good indication. You get an opportunity to get in, Road Burner. You sit back, shh, and hold on. The fun's about to start. To hold the front ones in place, there's a whole bunch of options that you could go with. The kit that we have is very universal. It has multiple holes in the brackets to make adjustments on all four corners.
We also opted for the sliders. Now, if it's just you that's going to be driving your pride and joy, you may not need them. This is just a basic upgrade, and it's only missed when you need it. Ooh, yeah. Now, there's several things you have to consider when you're installing seats in a car, but the most important stuff is right here in the driver's seat.
Is comfort your main focus? If that's the case, you just need to get everything dialed into that sweet spot that makes you feel good. But if you're more of a driver than a styler, you're gonna have some different specs. Commonly, the steering wheel is in a 20 to 30 degree angle to give you optimal control. Adjust the seat so that when you're sitting with your shoulders against the seat back, your arm is practically straight and your wrist is just forward of the back side of the steering wheel on the top. Using this setup positions your body in a location that allows you to steer comfortably and helps to reduce fatigue. Also, with the pedals, you don't want your legs to fully extend when you press them down. If the seat is too far back, this will be an issue. What you're looking for is a slight bend in your knee when you mash them to the floor. It's all about the details. If you look close, the pattern on the front cover matches the rear seat. And we also used the same two different vegan leather materials to make sure it was accurate. From the beginning, what we had wasn't much. It's easy to say that our interior was picked to the bone. But with some parts and help from some good friends, along with a little sweat and effort on our part, we was able to transform this empty shell of neglect back to what it once was. A prideful piece of Detroit muscle. Next, we make some connections. Will they put us in a bind, or will sparks fly? Road burner's almost finished. One of the last things oftentimes a person tackles on their project is the exhaust system. You could take it down to your local exhaust shop and have them take care of things for you, or you could buy yourself a pre-bent kit like oftentimes we do. Either way, the process is basically the same. You start here at the headers and begin to make your way toward the back of the car. After you hang a few pieces of pipe, well, you're just forward the rear axle, and this is where you're normally gonna mount up your mufflers. Finally, you're at the back of the car, and you get to weld on a tip or get creative with a cool slice to doll things up. An exhaust system is made using multiple pieces connected together. That connection can be had several different ways. Let's talk about the most basic one first, clamps. There are several different styles, and depending on your goals would help you determine which one to use. Now this one is the old school two-piece style and is oftentimes found on classics. It requires one piece of pipe to slide into the other. With it in place, just tighten the nuts up and it compresses the outer onto the inner. If you're in the middle of a restoration of some Detroit iron and going for that OG look, there's a really good chance that this is what you'll be using. This one is what's referred to as a band clamp style. It works really well whenever you're trying to join two pieces of pipe together that are the same diameter. You just slide it into place, tighten everything up, and it's good to go.
A much more permanent solution to building your plumbing is through welding. And when it comes to the alloys involved, well, you've got a few different options, including mild steel, aluminized, stainless, and even some exotic ones like titanium and Inconel. And to fuse those pieces together, you're either going to be using a MIG or a TIG welder. Now with mild steel and aluminized, a smaller MIG setup like this will do the trick. And you can use a bigger one if you want, but it's a little bit overkill. We're not exactly building a skyscraper here. And another advantage is the wand size. Not only will it help you get into those hard to reach spots, but it'll also get the job done quicker. Now with stainless steel, you can use a MIG welder, but if you're gonna go that route, you basically got two options. One, you could weld it with the standard steel wire, but your beads are gonna be more prone to corrosion. Or two, a better way is to swap out your steel wire for stainless, along with the proper shielding gas, which in that case would be helium. Not only are you gonna have the convenience of a MIG welder, but your welds aren't gonna be as prone to corrosion. If you really want to dress up that exhaust and take it that extra mile, a TIG is the way to go. You can weld all those exotic alloys I mentioned earlier. Just make sure you use the proper filler rod for the material you're working with. For our application, all we need is the trusty MIG welder.
Just like everything else on this Mopar, the tune coming out of the exhaust is going to be easily noticed and obviously aggressive. So let me introduce you to the American Thunder Series exhaust by Flowmaster. We make some pretty good power with that Hemi, so these 3-inch mandrel bent pieces of automotive perfection will allow our power plant to breathe easy. That, combined with a pair of Super 40 chambered mufflers, will generate a deep and powerful sound to perk up the ear of any red-blooded throttle pedal junkie. This kit should fit right up under road burner, but we may have to do a small amount of massaging to accommodate that 4-link rear that we're running from Riley Motorsports. But that's just a stone for a stepper.
And you know what they say, a hot rod is never truly completely done. But after some mandatory optical improvements, some stylish enhancements, and a one-of-a-kind accessory, it's just about time to take this old girl out for a night on the town.
We still have a few other loose ends that we're going to have to tie up, but the next time that you get to see this piece of Detroit muscle, there's going to be plenty of fire and smoke. Emphasis on the smoke.
Today on Detroit Muscle, we take a trip in Road Burner to see what it takes to become a legend.
Plus, we give you the cheat sheet on how you can optimize your ride. Through the passing of time, what once was new becomes aged. Items fall to decay and become discarded. At this point, dismantling is set into action by both man and Mother Nature. Some are left to dissolve into non-existence and are consumed by their environment. What is left often appears as a lifeless shell, laying and waiting as its days are numbered. It takes a soulful body with an eye to see what once was and what could be. A creation associated with magnitude requires many items. To harness its capabilities requires components of speed and agility. An unsightly collection is not an option, because without form, the eye begins to wander, and sight becomes crude. To accomplish this with appeal, strength, and might equals success.
From the very beginning, this old Mopar has always had a haunting aura about it. So we set out to build something that would strike fear into those who came upon it. A unique muscle machine that would have an aggressive stance, a decibel-piercing power plant, and a raw attitude. Quite simply, we wanted to build something that made a statement. Now that all the pieces of the puzzle are together, I think it's safe to say that message will be heard loud and clear.
Every car that was brought in today is worthy of being a Hot Wheels.
The Hot Wheels Legends Tour is one of the most unique car events worldwide. Tommy and I got the opportunity to be judges for the Atlanta show, and we saw some amazing custom cars and trick trucks.
Well, I have to say, this has been a pure honor to hang out with the Hot Wheels crew, and actually just parking our car in front of that billboard, man, it feels, yeah, I'm speechless. That says something.
I gotta say, man, I don't think we could have came up with a better payoff for this Road Runner project. Like, this thing literally looks like a Hot Wheels car. When you think about the history, the heritage, and the wild charisma that Hot Wheels is known for, this car reflects it, man.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you what I do want to do, though.
What's that?
Let's go get an ice cream cone. It's hot.
Want to figure out your optimum vehicle performance? We give you the solution using simple math. Road tripping in our old Plymouth sure was a whole lot of fun. After getting a few miles on it, now we've got it back up on the lift to check to see if we've shook anything loose. Also to verify that we don't have any leaks or seeps.
Yeah, and we really didn't have too many issues to speak of, except for when we ran out of gas because we forgot to calibrate the fuel gauge. Let's not get caught up on the details. We still got to do that.
Another thing that impressed us was how well this thing cruised down the highway. It cornered nice, it drove like a dream, and a lot of that goes to the guys at RMS and their suspension setup.
If you were to judge this car by its appearance, something you might assume is that it would be crazy loud. But in all reality, it's not. Unless, of course, you flip the switch to open the cutout.
Yes, the exhaust and mufflers you choose can increase or decrease the decibel level. But there's another thing you should keep in mind.
That would be the amount of RPMs you're turning. So with your project, you gotta ask yourself a couple of questions. Are you going for a track car, a road car? And will the majority of seat time be spent making hot laps down the quarter mile or cruising down the boulevard on a Saturday night?
With Road Runner, we wanted to be able to stroll around in it and hop on the interstate without sounding like it was geared like a tractor, meaning when it's at 70, it's redlining the tack. To determine your RPM versus mile per hour, there is a mathematical equation. One part of the information that you're going to need is tire diameter.
And you can get this in a couple different ways. You can check with the manufacturer and get an exact measurement, or you can kick it old school with a tape measure.
Looks like we're about 28 inches.
It says 28.1 on the website.
It's killing me.
Another thing you're gonna need to determine is the gear ratio coming out of your transmission. For example, a 1-to-1 ratio would mean that for every revolution of the engine is equivalent to 1 revolution coming out of the output shaft. If you have a Power Glide or a C4, a C6, or even a 727, more than likely you're going to be running a 1-to-1 ratio in high gear. We're running a little bit more of a modern setup that has overdrive, therefore the math and the variables change, but it's important to know by how much. Depending on the manufacturer, they can come in a few different ratios, like our TKX. This one has a 0.68 to 1, but they're offered in a 0.72 and a 0.81.
While we're on the subject of gears, well, you're gonna need to know what your setup is in the rear diff. Now, we installed a set of 355s when we were doing our suspension upgrade, so we know exactly what we have. If you have no idea, here's a little tip for you that'll get you pretty close. Make a mark on the wheel like here on the top. Then make a mark on the flange or yoke where the drive shaft would attach. As you spin the wheel, count the revolutions of the pinion. 1, 2, 3, and almost a half. That would give us a 355-ish. So how many times that goes around combined with the percentage of the next turn will get you in the ballpark. This is the equation that you can use to determine your miles per hour at a given RPM. Now, we pretty much already have most of our information like tire diameter and our ratios. Now, usually when you're driving one of these old hot roddy cars, the normal RPM level is somewhere between 2 and 2200 RPM. So for the sake of what we're doing, we're gonna go with 2200. According to Joel, we got a 28.1 tire diameter. Trans ratio was 0.68 and rear was 355. Now let's do some math, see what we come up with. We got 2200 times 28.1 equals 61,820. 0.68 times 3.55 times 336, 811. Let's divide these two. 61820 divided by 81110. That gives us 76.21. So what all these numbers mean is the parts that we've chose to put in old Road Burner, if we're ever out on a Saturday afternoon hot lap, well, the tack isn't gonna be mad and the engine's gonna be in that sweet spot. And we're almost not breaking the law.
Old Road Burner has been a blast to build and drive, and we can't wait to get it out on the track to start snatching through some gears at wide open throttle. You know, we like to take care of our projects, even when they're just hanging out.
Road Burner is done for now, and we want to make sure nothing happens to all of our hard work, especially since it's missing the hood.
This works well for indoor and outdoor applications, made of a breathable material to help allow heat, moisture, and condensation to escape. And if you're looking for a cover for long-term storage situations, this may be the one for you.
Installation is a breeze, and it fits like a tailored suit.
You know, it's almost a shame to put all this work into this car just to put it to bed till we can get it out to the track.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be fun though. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. You know, at some point we should probably pull that Hurst Olds out of hibernation.
Yeah. I'm not gonna say I'm tired of working on a Mopar, but I'm ready to work on something different.
I know what you mean. You know me, you don't have to twist my arm to work on a GM product.